Hello! You're about to begin a new course as part of the Google UX Design Certificate. Congratulations on making it this far into the program. You're doing an incredible job and you're nearing the finish line. By this point, you've already learned how to empathize with users and understand their needs, define user needs by creating problem statements, come up with lots of ideas for solutions to those user problems, build wireframes and prototypes on paper and in a design tool called Figma. And you've learned how to test those prototypes and get feedback from research participants to improve your designs. In this course, you'll take all that you've learned about the design process and start a brand new project in Adobe XD. Adobe XD is a really valuable tool for UX designers to learn and is often listed on entry-level job postings. And this time, we've also got a new challenge for you. You'll design a responsive website. This new project will help diversify the work in your portfolio, which is something employers are often on the lookout for. Specifically, you'll learn how to explain the concept of responsive web design, use empathy and define user needs to build a responsive website, practice coming up with lots of ideas for website design solutions, build wireframes and a low-fidelity prototype, create mockups and a high-fidelity prototype, test your prototypes and get feedback to improve your designs, complete a second UX design project to be included in your portfolio, produce or update a resume, and explore potential UX design jobs in the real world. Before we get started, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Dave and I'm a UX manager on Google Maps. I lead UX programs and operations for parts of Google Maps like driving, navigation, transportation, and automotive. I'm thrilled to be here teaching you about Adobe XD and designing for websites. I've been in the UX field for about 15 years now, but spent the first 2 years of my career as a scripting programmer desperately seeking a path to UX. After taking some classes, building a portfolio of work, and a lot of perseverance, I landed my first UX role. Since then, I've worked all over the world designing everything from consumer apps like Spotify and PayPal to enterprise apps like financial trading platforms and HR systems. I've even worked with Adobe on building XD for Windows. I hope you're as excited as I am to create this new project and add it to your portfolio. So let's get started. For me, participating in this program is really important. I've actually spent quite a lot of my career trying to educate non-design folks in some of the aspects of design. So to get to do this at a broad scale to folks who are actively engaged in building UX career is really important to me. I had a massive interest in UI. I know it sounds crazy, but I used to watch Star Trek as a kid and I loved those interfaces they had, and they really got me hooked in touch technologies way before it eventually came out. So that kind of appreciation for good design and appreciation for, I guess, futuristic technology, combined with my general inquisitive nature, I think set me up well for this career. I actually had a slightly non-traditional path into UX. I did an undergraduate degree in software engineering and artificial intelligence, but I did my thesis on human-centered systems aspects. And then I got my first job as a programmer, but I was a scripting programmer, which was a bit of a surprise for me. So I was writing in Linux, so lots of black screens and white text. And I decided that I wanted to move properly into the field of UX. So I took a part-time master's degree in human-centered systems, or HCI. Because I had to make the transition from a more non-traditional role into UX, one of the things that I did as well as studying for my master's degree was try and build up a portfolio of work, kind of like what you folks have been doing in this course. So I helped out around the office, I designed posters and flyers, I revamped the websites when I saw opportunities to do that, just so I could build a body of work to help me apply for that actual first UX job. When I went for my first UX role, it was an internal role in the company that I was at, and they didn't have an interaction designer for their internal business systems. So I thought I would apply for it and give it a shot. And I had this portfolio of work showing that I could do some design work and do some web design and that kind of thing. But one of the requirements they had was to be completely fluent in HTML and CSS. I kind of knew my way around it, but I wouldn't really call myself fluent in it. And thankfully, through luck and hard work in my portfolio, I managed to land the job. So I guess my advice is you can still build skills that you can learn for a role that you're applying to or that you've got. You can still learn new things as you go along. If you're new to Adobe XD, there's a plethora of resources that you can use to learn how to use the tool. I spent so much time in it just playing around. You can do all sorts of stuff in it. You can get plenty of resources online. You can download other people's files and pull them apart and see how they've made things. Also, XD updates every month, with new features. So there's always something new to try out. And that kind of engagement keeps pulling me back in. I'm like, oh, wow, this could save me a bunch of time. Let's go try that feature. So I really recommend that you take advantage of those resources. My name's Dave. I'm a Senior UX Program Manager at Google. Hi again. In this first part of the course, I'll introduce you to Adobe XD, which is a design tool you'll use to create the second project for your portfolio. To bring your website designs to life, you'll follow the steps of the UX design process: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. I'll tee up each step you need to take to complete your portfolio project. If this is the first course of the certificate program that you've taken, you might want to go back and take earlier courses. Or if you just need a refresher before you work on your new project, all of the content you might need to revisit will be linked in the course readings. Either way, I'll be there to guide you through each step as you design a responsive website. So you might be wondering what you'll learn about in this part of the course. We'll start by talking about responsive web design. After that, we'll learn how to use Adobe XD. Together, we'll explore the Adobe XD platform, and I'll share a couple of tips to make using it easier. Next, we'll empathize with users and build an empathy map, personas, and a user story. We'll also rediscover the benefits of a user journey map. Finally, we'll use a problem statement to define the problem we're trying to solve. It's pretty exciting, right? So let's get started by talking about responsive websites. Hey there. Before we start the design process for a responsive website, let's explore what responsive design is. We'll also discuss why websites should be responsive and why it's good for UX designers to have responsive website designs in their portfolio. You may remember from earlier in the program that responsive web design allows a website to change automatically depending on the size of the device. Responsive websites will appear smaller to fit smaller screens like mobile phones, and will appear larger to fit larger screens like desktop computers. Responsive web design often involves more than changing the size of a website. When planning a website design, UX designers need to consider how the elements on each page will respond to different screen sizes. A smaller screen means less space. A responsive website might change where elements appear. For example, a desktop version of a website might list its popular pages along the top of the screen. A mobile version of the site won't have as much space at the top, so these popular pages may be grouped inside a hamburger menu instead. Designing multiple versions of the same website can take more time, but it ensures people are able to use the website on any device. In 2019, a Pew Research Center study found that 74% of adults in the US owned a desktop or laptop computer, and 81% owned a smartphone. With this data, you can assume your website's users are likely to access it from many device types. Designing your website for multiple device types is a great way to make sure anyone who wants to use your website can. Users need to be able to interact with website content in similar ways, regardless of a device's viewing size. Let's use a bank website as an example. It's important for me as a user to be able to see how much money is in my checking account, even if I'm not near a computer and can only use my mobile phone. Changing my device and still being able to access my bank info makes me feel like my needs are being met as a user. Highlighting your understanding of responsive web design is a fantastic way to make your portfolio attractive to potential employers. Designing responsive websites is a common and useful task for UX designers, and here's why. A study from 2019 found that there were over 185 million active websites on the internet, and more websites are created every second. That's a huge number. With so many active websites, the rate at which more websites are being created, and the number of people with mobile phones, there's a big market for professionals who can design websites that are easy to use on any device. In other words, lots of businesses need responsive websites. In a survey of over 900 UX designers, 90% reported that they had recently worked on a website or web-based application, and 76% had recently worked on a mobile app. This statistic tells us that while designing mobile apps is important work for UX designers, employers will likely ask you to design web-based projects as well. By having experience in responsive web design in your portfolio, employers know you can manage the job. Now that we've learned more about what responsive web design is, why it's important, and how your portfolio can benefit from including a responsive website project, we're going to explore a new tool that you'll use to design a responsive website in this course, Adobe XD. I'll meet you in the next video. Hello. Let's start exploring how to use Adobe XD together. Adobe XD allows you to create wireframes, mockups, and prototypes for digital products like websites and mobile apps. In this course, we'll use XD as we design a responsive website. At this point in the certificate program, you might be thinking, hang on, this sounds like Figma. Do I really need to learn another design tool? Well, in short, yes. Some companies might prefer one design tool over another, so you might not always have the choice of which tool to use. Knowing how to design and build prototypes with multiple tools can broaden your UX knowledge and qualifies you for more job postings. By the time you finish this certificate program, we want to make sure you can apply to as many job opportunities as possible. Eventually, you'll develop a preference for a certain design tool like Figma or Adobe XD or others, but you won't know which tool you prefer until you give some of them a try. In addition, knowing more than one tool helps you stay nimble. In the field of UX design, the tools we use change rapidly, so you need to be adaptable. The more tools you know, the easier it is to switch gears when needed. Like Figma, Adobe XD has its own unique features and benefits. For one, Adobe programs and services work well together. For example, a file created in Adobe Illustrator can easily be imported into Adobe XD, which makes your design process seamless. In addition, sharing in Adobe XD is easy. It can be done right from your artboards. You can generate web links that anyone can use to preview your designs or prototypes, and get feedback directly on your artboards. There's also built-in user testing mode that allows users to test your designs. And Adobe XD is built to work collaboratively with other users. This is great for end-to-end production for design teams. Adobe XD has both free and paid plans, but for this certificate program, you'll use the XD Starter Plan, which is free for everyone. One thing to keep in mind, if you are taking this course on a Chromebook, you'll need to complete your project for this course in Figma instead of Adobe XD, because unfortunately, Adobe XD is not compatible with Chromebooks. If this is the case for you, there'll be optional readings that follow each Adobe XD demonstration video with guidance specific to Figma. All right, let's roll up our sleeves and get into designing Adobe XD. I'll meet you in the next video. Hey there, it's time to get started with creating designs in Adobe XD. Throughout this course, you'll design a fully functional responsive website. To demonstrate each step of the process, I'll be designing a responsive website for a local library. The website will include a search function, a catalogue of materials, and the ability to reserve a book. We'll get into more details later on, but for now, let's open up XD and start familiarizing ourselves with the program. When you first open XD, you'll be greeted by the welcome screen. The welcome screen gives you the option to select the size of the device you want to design for, like a phone or a website. These sizes are shown in pixels. I'm going to focus on the website options since we'll be designing a website in this course. If you want to change the size of your web layout, you can click the drop-down menu here. But I'll leave this at 1920 by 1080 pixels for now. The number 1920 represents the screen resolution in pixels. I'm going to double-click the website tool to select this option. Now let's check out the main UI of Adobe XD. At the top of the screen, we have tabs like Design, Prototype, and Share. Clicking these words will switch you between the two work modes in Adobe XD, building your designs or creating a prototype. On the left side of the screen are the toolbox and the panel for libraries, layers, or plugins. In the middle of the screen is the canvas where you'll create your designs. And finally, on the right side of the screen is the property inspector. I know this seems like a lot, but fear not, we'll break down each of these areas in the coming videos. For now, let's stay on the Design tab. This grey area is called the canvas and will house all of your artboards. We already have an artboard for a website, but let's add another so you can get a feel for the process. To add an artboard to your work surface, select the Artboard tool from the tool palette on the left. It's the icon above the magnifying glass that looks like a piece of paper with a folded corner. When I click this tool, notice how the panel on the right side changes and displays a list of artboards to choose from. I'm going to select Web 1920 again because I want my screen size and resolution to remain the same while I design different pages of my website. If I continue to click on the canvas, it will automatically add more artboards in the size I've selected. But I don't need any more artboards right now, so I'm going to go back to my toolbar on the left and choose the Selection tool, which looks like the pointer on a computer mouse arrow. Now that I've added more artboards, I'll create a quick heading for the library website. On the left, I'll find the toolbox tools I can use to design the artboards. The top tool, which is a selection tool, will allow me to select and move entire artboards or individual elements in the artboards. The rectangle, ellipse, line, pen and text tools can be used to create the designs on your artboard. The magnifying glass at the bottom will increase the size of my artboard. I'll use the magnifying glass to zoom in. Okay, now I'll select the text tool and create a heading on the artboard. I'll type in Wisconsin County Library. Because I just added a text box to the artboard, a list of options appeared in the Property Inspector on the right. These options are for the alignment types, transform tools, and the text appearances. Since the text I added is too small to be a heading at the top of a website, I'll use the font appearance option to make the text bigger. For example, I might change the font size from 20 to 100. I also want to move the text towards the top of the page in the middle by dragging the text box. To do that, I'll select my selection tool to the left with my mouse and then drag the text box. Next, I'll add a square to represent the library's logo. To do this, I'll go to the toolbox on the left side of the screen and select the rectangle tool. As you might remember from working in Figma, if you want to draw a perfect equal square, you can hold down the Shift key whilst you draw the shape. The same pro tip works here in Adobe XD too. Let's imagine the library we're designing this website for wants to put all of the recent book releases front and center on the homepage. So I'll draw a placeholder for a book using the rectangle tool again, and I'll give it a title using the text tool. Awesome, now I have some assets on my artboard. Now I want to align the content using a layout grid. As a refresher, a layout grid is a series of columns and gutters that allow you to organize elements in a design. Remember using a layout grid earlier in the program when you worked in Figma? This is similar in Adobe XD. I'll navigate to the toolbox on the left side of my screen and choose the selection tool. Now I can double-click on my artboard to select it. And know it's selected as a blue line appears around the outside of the artboard. After I select my artboard, the right side panel will change, and at the bottom a section called Grid appears. I'm going to select the checkbox in this section. Alright, if I go back to the right side of the screen, I'll have a whole new list of options to work with. These allow me to customize the grid columns. I can adjust everything from the color of the columns to the spacing between columns and more. I'll play with these a bit so you can understand how they work. For example, I can change the color of the columns to purple by clicking on the checkered box beside the word column here. I can also change the number of columns from 12 to 14. And here's a pro tip. When you select the layout grid, Adobe XD will automatically populate a number of columns depending on the size of your artboard. For large artboards, like the desktop computer I'm using, it'll automatically create 12 columns. Generally, the smaller the screen size is, the fewer columns there will be. Next, I can change the gutter width. You might remember gutters from the last course when we worked in Figma. In Figma, the space between the columns were called alleys. Gutters and alleys are the same. They just have different names and different tools. Gutters separate the content you'll add to your designs. For responsive web design, which is the focus of this course, gutter width can change at different breakpoints, which are the cutoff points that define sizes for different screens. Adobe XD will also automatically calculate gutters based on the size of the artboard you created. In this case, the default gutter size is 16. I'll change this from 16 to 10 to show you how it's done. Last but not least, let's check out margins. Margins are the distance between the layout grid and the end of the artboard on all four sides. Let me share some inside scoop. You may want more space between the content and the ends of the artboard for a couple of reasons. One, because it creates negative space, which can define components on a page. Margins give content space to breathe. And two, margins can organize visual information by grouping items or images together. It helps users identify similar objects. By default, Adobe XD will show the left and right margins as customizable, which is the single value you see here. But I can change the margins for each of the four sides by selecting this icon here, which will reveal the four boxes that can be changed to your specifications. For example, if I want more space on the left side so I can put a navigation bar there, then I might increase the margin distance for that side only. I'll change that value on the left side to 250. Oh, that doesn't look quite right. You know, on second thoughts, I might adjust those settings later. I want to change the values back to the default values Adobe XD sets, but I can't remember what those values were. The good news is, I can select the Use Default button here to reset them all to 12 columns, 16 width gutter, 122 column width, and 140 margins. Cool. Now that I have these columns to help organize my design, I'll click the selection tool and align some of the assets in the artboard. First, I'm going to center the title using the columns. Then I'll do the same for the book placeholder and its title. And there you have it. I've created an artboard and assets with Adobe XD. Now that I've covered the basics of designing in Adobe XD, it's time for you to set up an artboard for your own design project and play around in XD for a bit. Have fun!
My name is Jennifer, and I'm a user experience research manager at Google. I look at prototyping tools as things that are very important for designers to get comfortable with. Not so much for getting comfortable with a specific tool, but getting comfortable with the idea of learning and continuously learning new tools. Tools will change. The organizations that you work with might specify what kinds of tools you use, so you might not have been using this other tool. You might have to very quickly ramp up on another tool, and that's happened to me as well. And I first started using Adobe XD when I was working with various nonprofits. As a designer, I already had access to the Adobe Creative Cloud suite, so I was regularly using those tools. And so when they started to improve on the XD prototyping tool, I said, why not? It's another prototyping tool I can use. And it ended up being very easy to use, very flexible. And since it was already incorporated into the tool chains that I was already using, it was a natural fit for me. And so I actually started using Adobe XD at a time where I had other prototyping tools that I was using. And little by little, I started to let go of the other tools and rely more and more on Adobe XD. I can learn how to use some basic tools in 30 minutes to an hour. I can get comfortable with the workflows of the tools. I can get comfortable with the layouts and try it on a couple projects. But at the end of the day, you're not necessarily committed to only that tool. So I think something that helps people get over the hesitancy is understanding that nothing is ever permanent. And then also being comfortable with the idea that not every tool is going to work with everybody. Tools change, your needs change, and the kinds of projects that you work on change. As a designer, it's very important for you to be flexible.
Hi again. Before we start creating wireframes and prototypes for a website in Adobe XD, let's take some time to think about who we're designing for, our users. To design a website, we'll follow the design process. As you might remember, the first step in the design process is to empathize with users. If you've been taking the courses of the certificate program in order, this video will be a quick review of what you've already learned so far when it comes to empathy. If this is the first course of the program that you've taken, you might want to go back and revisit our earlier videos about empathizing with users before you proceed. Any concepts you might need to review in more detail are linked in the course reading. Let's get started. We always keep the user front and center when we design. One way that we can build great user experiences is to empathize with our users. Empathy is the ability to understand someone else's feelings or thoughts in a situation. Empathy is at the heart of the work we do as UX designers. As a UX designer, empathizing is your #1 superpower. Empathy helps you spot user problems, and solving these problems is the ultimate goal of UX design. One of the ways that we can better empathize with users is by creating an empathy map. An empathy map is an easily understood chart that explains everything designers have learned about a user. Empathy maps have 4 squares that address what a particular user says, thinks, does, and feels. So let's think about the library website. Imagine we've already conducted a few interviews with potential users. Now it's time to put together an empathy map for one of them, Lorena. Here's what that map might include. In the Says square, we'll use a quote that Lorena gave us during their interview. "I wish the library made it easier for me to access all the newest mystery releases." In the Think square, we'll note that Lorena was smiling and leaning forward as they spoke. It was clear that they are passionate about books and care deeply about accessing them. In the Does square, we'll list one of the things that Lorena has done to try and check out a book at the library. They dropped by the library in the late afternoon to look for new books to check out after school is finished for the day. In the Feel square, We'll list the questions we asked Lorena during the interview and the words they attributed with their experience. We asked, "How did you feel when you found out the library didn't have your book?" And Lorena responded that they felt frustrated and annoyed. So why are empathy maps important? Well, empathy maps help us get into the user's mindset, which allows us to better identify their pain points. Pain points are any UX issues that frustrate the user and block them from getting what they need. Have you ever struggled to break the vacuum seal on an unopened jar of jam? That's an example of a pain point. The jar's design is blocking you from getting to the tasty jam inside. There are 4 categories that pain points can fall into: financial or money-related pain points, product, which are pain points related to quality issues, process, which are pain points related to the user's journey, and support, which are pain points related to getting help from customer service. Identifying the pain points your user is experiencing will help you find potential problems that your design can solve. And this has great value for users and your brand. In fact, Google's mantra is focus on the users and everything else will follow. Now that we know Lorena and their needs, we can identify their pain points. The first pain point is that Lorena can't access the library outside of operating hours. That pain point falls into the product category because the library is considered the product and the user, Lorena, is having an issue using the product. The second pain point is that Lorena can only check out books from the library in person. This pain point falls into the process category because Lorena cannot get from point A to point B in the user journey. For example, Lorena found out the library did not have their book after commuting to the library. Understanding your user's needs and more specifically their pain points informs your entire design process and makes your product design invaluable. As you move forward in this course and in your first job as a UX designer, be sure to always keep users and their needs top of mind. Coming up, we'll continue to empathize with our users by creating personas. Hey there! Now that we've refreshed our knowledge of empathy maps and user pain points, let's review how to develop personas. You might remember this from earlier videos, but personas in UX design are fictional users whose goals and characteristics represent the needs of a larger group of users. Although personas are fictional representations of your users, they're based on very real research. They help you and your team stay focused on user needs. Personas are also one of the most effective ways to give a clear direction to your design solutions. Changing a persona can change what you'll design. Personas generally include a photo and a short biographical section that explains the user's age, education, hometown, family situation, occupation, and any other relevant info. So let's go back to the library website we're designing. Using the information that I learned from conducting user interviews, I'll create my first persona, Shane. Shane's persona will be created from a combination of interviews I conducted with different potential users of the library website. When you interview users, take notes of the time when several users state the same specific pain point, motivation, or need. You'll use this information to build a persona that is representative of the group of users you interviewed. So for my persona, I'll say Shane is 48 years old. They have a GED and live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They're married and work as a car mechanic. Shane works 60-hour weeks and finds it hard to reach the library before it closes at 5 p.m. They rely on the library as a source for new books. Shane, unfortunately, has recently begun experiencing symptoms of arthritis. Now that I've covered Shane's background info, I can focus on their needs as a library user. I'll note that Shane's goals are to be able to reserve books on their schedule, to have books that they want to read available when they arrive at the library, and to read more political thrillers. Shane feels frustrated at having to arrange their busy schedule to reach the library in time to check out books before it closes. By creating a persona, we're better able to tell the user's story, empathize with them, and eventually design a solution for them too. So think about Shane. They just want to be able to access the books they want when their schedule allows. But it seems like they keep hitting roadblocks. Let's see how we can help them with our product designs. After this quick refresher on personas, you can get to work creating personas for your own design project. So get to it. Hi again. Now that we've built out a persona for our library website project, it's time to create a user story. As a reminder, if this material feels unfamiliar to you, check out our earlier content on this topic that's linked in the reading that follows this video. Okay, before we actually build out a user story, let's quickly remember what a user story is. A user story is a fictional, one-sentence story told from a persona's point of view to inspire and inform design decisions. User stories deepen our ability to connect to our users' needs. They also help us prioritize our design goals so we can pick the most important pain points for our products to solve, unite the team around the website's main goals, inspire empathetic design decisions that are truly centered around the user's needs, and personalized pitches to stakeholders to better demonstrate how our design will cater to each persona's main pain point. To build a great user story, you'll need a well-researched empathy map and corresponding persona that relates directly to your product. Let's use Shane, our persona for our library website, to build an example user story. Shane needs easier access to check out books. Their pain points include having to drive to the library to check out books that might not even be available, and being unable to access the library outside of the library's operating hours. Using this info, let's build Shane a user story. Each user story needs a hero, a goal, and a conflict. In this example, Shane is our hero. We know one of Shane's goals is to reserve books on their schedule. And we've learned that one of the main pain points, or the conflict Shane is facing, is having to rearrange their busy schedule to reach the library in time to check out books before it closes. You might remember our user story formula from earlier videos, which goes, as a role, I want to action so that benefit. In this formula, role refers to the who, action refers to the what, and benefit refers to the why of our user story. So let's fill out the formula from the perspective of our persona Shane. As a busy professional and book lover, I want to be able to reserve books on my own schedule so that I know my book will be available when I drive to the library to pick it up. From Shane's user story, we can determine that our website design should allow users to place holds and check out books in order to improve their access to the library services. User stories empower us to design for our target users and their unique pain points. Rooted in research, these stories are an invaluable part of the design process and help us make products that meet users' needs. Coming up, you'll have a chance to create user stories for your own design project. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Hey there! You're starting to really empathize with users and are developing a stronger understanding of who your user is. Now, let's talk about how we turn a user story into a user journey map. As a reminder, a user journey is the series of experiences a user has as they interact with your product while they want to achieve a specific goal. User journeys build off the personas and stories you've already created. They help you think and feel like the user, which is super important. If you can't put yourself in the user's shoes, you can't be sure your design will really help them. Think of it this way. Personas are the foundation of your design process to empathize with users. User stories focus on the pain points that your personas are experiencing. And the user journey provides additional details to build out specific user stories. Before you start the user journey, you need a journey map. A journey map is just what it sounds like, an illustration of what the user goes through to achieve their goals. Several benefits can come from building user journey maps. First, user journey maps can help create obstacle-free paths for users that solve their pain points as clearly as possible. Additionally, user journey maps can reduce the impact of designer bias, which you might remember as a tendency for the designer to design according to their own needs and wants, instead of the user's. Creating a journey map lets you thoroughly detail the user's interaction with your design. That way, you can really focus on how a specific persona, and not you, thinks and feels at every step. User journey maps can also highlight new pain points that your user might experience along their journey as they use your product. And finally, user journey maps can help you identify improvement opportunities that could streamline the user experience and ease your access to the product. So how do we map out a user journey? One action at a time. We use these 4 steps. Step 1, note each action that a user needs to take to reach their goal. Imagine our persona Shane wants to check out a physical book using our library website. Shane needs to browse the catalogue of books, choose a book they're interested in reading, try to reserve the book, join a waitlist if the book is not immediately available, and then pick up the book from the library. Step 2, add descriptions for each action. Which tasks does our user have to complete? Well, for the browse the catalogue of books action, Shane might have to complete tasks like browse new releases, sort books by genre, and search for authors. You would add tasks like this for each action. I've gone ahead and completed this for our library website example. You can review this user journey map in more detail in the reading following this video if you're interested. Step 3, add how the user feels at each point. Guesstimates are okay in this step. For example, our persona Shane feels eager and inquisitive as they browse a catalogue of books. Then, Shane feels excited and optimistic that they can choose the book they're interested in reading. Similar to the last step, I've added feelings for each of these actions. And finally, step 4, add improvement opportunities. This is where we'd identify new ideas to improve each action in the user journey. For example, Shane's experience browsing the catalogue of books could be improved with the ability to select multiple filters at once. You can come up with lots of ideas for potential improvements to your design during this step, like I've done here. Awesome. Now we have a user journey map that we can use to design a practical and useful website that meets the needs of Shane and our other users. Next, it's time to take what you've learned here and build your own user journey map. Remember, your research is your guide, and don't forget to double check your assumptions. Good luck. Welcome back. Now that you've learned about your users and taken lots of steps to empathize with them, it's time to move on to the define stage. Let's use everything we've built so far to create a problem statement. As we previously discussed, a problem statement is a clear description of the user's needs that should be addressed. Great problem statements use human-centered language. It's also best practice for these statements to be broad enough to allow for creative freedom, but narrow enough to be solved by a design solution. Problem statements can be written using a simple formula. Start with the name of the user, add a short description of the user's characteristics, clearly describe the user's need, and explain why the user has that need. In other words, an insight about the user. Let's think about a problem statement for a library website and our persona, Shane. I use Shane's persona details, pain points, user story, and user journey map to create this problem statement. Shane is a busy professional and book lover who needs to easily find and reserve books online because they want their book to be available to pick up at the library. So what can we learn from a problem statement like this one? First, problem statements help us to establish goals. An effective problem statement tells us what the user really needs. Defining the goal clearly and concisely gets everyone on the design team on board and focused on the same thing. Second, problem statements help us understand constraints. We want to know what's keeping users, like Shane, from satisfying their needs. Third, problem statements help us define deliverables. When we finally solve the problem, what will we have to show for it? It's helpful to know what a design solution will produce. And finally, problem statements help us create benchmarks for success. All right, now that we've reviewed how to build a problem statement, you can come up with a problem statement for your own project. Good luck entering the define phase. Congratulations! You've finished the first part of this course. Let's quickly review everything you've learned so far. First, you learned about responsive design and chose a new portfolio project. Next, you discovered the basics of how to use a new design platform, Adobe XD, and learned about the benefits that Adobe XD can provide as a program. Then, you empathized with users and built an empathy map, personas, and a user story. You also rediscovered the benefits of user journey maps. Finally, you defined the user's needs by creating a problem statement. Well done! Next up, we're going to discuss the ideation part of the design process. We'll do some sketching using the Crazy 8s exercise, revisit information architecture, and create a sitemap for our library website. I'll meet you there. Welcome back. Earlier, we discussed Adobe XD, and you learned about its value as a tool for UX design. We also revisited the idea of empathizing with users, building user stories, and creating user journeys. Then, you defined the user's problem using problem statements. Now, we're ready to explore how ideation helps UX designers create web designs. You may remember that ideation is a process of generating a broad set of ideas on a given topic with no attempt to judge or evaluate them. In this part of the course, we'll recall how to use competitive research to inform your designs. Then we'll do some sketching to come up with ideas for our website design using ideation techniques like How Might We's and Crazy 8s. Finally, we'll cover the importance of information architecture when creating website structures, and we'll learn what a sitemap is and how to build one. Ready to go? Let's get started. Hey there! As you enter the ideation phase of the design process, it's important to compare the product you're designing with other products from similar organizations. For example, understanding what other libraries are doing helps us create a relevant, valuable design for the website we're designing. That's where competitive audits come in. As a refresher, a competitive audit is an overview of your competitor's strengths and weaknesses. These audits are used to collect information about what the competition's doing, including the techniques that are working and the ones that need improvement. You can learn a lot from a competitive audit. Competitive audits are useful because they help you identify your key competitors, review the products that your competitors offer, understand how your competitors position themselves in the market, examine what your competition does well and what they could do better, and consider how your competitors talk about themselves. So what do you consider to be your competition? To be thorough, you should indicate both direct and indirect competitors in your audit. Direct competitors have offerings that are similar to your product and focus on the same audience. Essentially, you're both trying to solve the same problem. Indirect competitors either have a similar set of offerings but focus on a different audience, or have a different set of offerings and focus on the same audience. So let's talk about direct and indirect competitors of the library we're designing a website for. Direct competitors to our library will be other libraries in the Milwaukee and the surrounding counties in Wisconsin, as well as online booksellers with a book rental option. Indirect competitors will include any place where you can purchase books, like used bookstores in Milwaukee and any online booksellers. Next, let's review the steps to conduct a competitive audit. The first step is to outline the goals for your competitive audit. Make sure your goals are specific to your product, users, and industry. The second step is to create a spreadsheet with a list of your competitors. You should aim to include about 5 to 10 competitors in your list. Some of them should be direct and others should be indirect. The third step calls out specific features you want to compare. This list of features should align to your goals for the audit. Fourth, research each company. You'll need to evaluate each competitor's website and take a note of your observations, focusing on the features you listed in step 3. Remember to include details like what works well, what could be improved, whether your competitor's features meet the needs of your specific audience. Fifth, analyze your findings. Try to spot trends and themes. Ask yourself, what are the similarities between you and your competitors? Is there a certain feature that your competitors all approach in the same way? Finally, summarize your findings in a report, providing clear explanation of your findings and what they mean for your design. Your report might be a slide presentation or a document. It's helpful to include screenshots and simple charts or graphics. Competitive audits are a fantastic way to provide designers with a lot of essential information, but there are limits to what they can do. There are even a few ways that they can get in the way of the design process. If you want to learn more about the limitations of competitive audits, I'd recommend you visit the earlier material about competitive audits, which you can find linked in the course readings. Coming up, you'll put your knowledge of competitive audits to the test and conduct one for the website you're designing. Can't wait to find out what you'll learn about your competition. Welcome back. We know that UX design is about more than just making something look great. We're always putting the user first, so your design has to be useful and effective too. That's why ideation is so important, in order to come up with lots of design solutions for the problems that our users might be experiencing. One way to kickstart the ideation process is with design thinking activities, like the How Might We exercise. You might remember this activity from an earlier course. The How Might We exercise lets us translate issues users are experiencing into opportunities for design. Reframing the user's need as a question can help you think of your users and their needs in a new way. Let's break it down. How encourages us to explore a bunch of ideas instead of moving forward with only one idea for the solution. The word how suggests that we don't have an answer yet. Might emphasizes the open-endedness of the brainstorming solution. Our ideas are possible solutions and not the only solution. And finally, the word we suggests a collaborative effort. Ideas that are thorough and innovative require teamwork to complete. The question should be specific in describing the needs of the user, but still have room for innovation in the final product. This means that the question is broad enough to leave space for solutions that might not be evident yet. Let's think back to Lorena, a user that we interviewed while conducting research for our library website. One of Lorena's pain points was that she can't access the library outside operating hours. And her other pain point was that she can only check out books from the library in person. Remember, during the ideation phase, we want to come up with a lot of ideas. So for this exercise, we want to come up with a lot of how might we questions and not just one. Coming up with how might we questions can be tricky though. To help, the design school at Stanford University outlines a bunch of ways to create how might we phrases. A few of them include amp up the good. For example, how might we make a library website the most exciting place to reserve books in advance? Change the status quo. How might we bring the library to Lorena? And break the point of view into pieces. How might we design a system that keeps track of all the books in stock? How might we allow users to reserve in-stock books on the library's website? There are more ways to reframe the problem covered in the course readings too. Check them out and get your creative juices flowing. Using the How Might We exercise, we've asked thoughtful questions to start our ideation process. But we can't just stop at one question or solution. Let's keep ideating with another design exercise, Crazy Eights. I'll meet you there. Hello! Earlier we discussed how to use ideation exercises to brainstorm ways to solve our users' problems. Now it's time for some artistic fun, sketching. In this video we'll discuss why quick, simple sketches are useful in the ideation process. We'll also work through the Crazy Eights exercise for the library website. If you've been taking the courses in this program in order, you may remember sketching using the Crazy Eights exercise for an app. Now I'll show you how to use the Crazy Eights exercise to sketch ideas for a website. We'll create really simple designs at first. These drawings don't have to look like anything in particular. The ideation phase is all about exploring lots of ideas at lightning speed, which forces you to think creatively without limits. Ideation is not about creating something beautiful or functional. At this point in the ideation phase, the whole team might gather to complete the Crazy Eights exercise together. With Crazy Eights, your team can compare drawings and then narrow down the list of ideas before moving forward with the best solutions. So let's get started. So grab a piece of paper and a pencil or a marker and we'll do some Crazy Eights sketching. First, start with a large sheet of paper. Fold the paper in half. Like this, and then fold it in half again, like this, and in half one more time. And when you unfold it, you'll now have 8 squares for 8 different ideas. To make this a bit more visible, I'm going to draw the lines on my paper where I folded, but you don't have to do this for your own paper. We'll limit each drawing to 60 seconds, so you'll also need a timer. It can be a clock, your phone, or a timer website. The last thing you'll need is a problem statement you created earlier. Ah yes, here's a problem statement I created for our persona Shane. Shane is a busy professional and book lover who needs to easily find and reserve books online because they want their book to be available to pick up at the library. I'll draw 8 ideas with this problem statement in mind. Remember, the idea behind Crazy Eights is to think creatively. No idea is too outrageous during a brainstorm. I'll draw any solution that comes to mind. Here we go. Okay, time's up. Let me show you some of the ideas I came up with to address our problem statement. As a reminder, our problem statement was Shane is a busy professional and book lover who needs to easily find and reserve books online because they want their book to be available to pick up at the library. I came up with 8 ideas as part of Crazy Eights, but let me quickly tell you about just 4 of them. If a user wants to find a book, a search box sounds like a sensible place to start, so I drew one of those here. Perhaps users might like to know what the most popular books are in their area or in different parts of the state, so I sketched a heat map of popular books here. This sketch over here shows a carousel of books that a user can swipe through, much like looking through books at an airport bookstore. This idea could bring familiar elements from the physical world into the digital world. And sometimes we might just want to judge a book by its cover. How about if we allowed users to search for blue books or books with penguins on the cover? That's what this sketch represents here. Now you're ready to try Crazy 8s on your own. Try using a problem statement that I just made up, like this one. Dakota is a self-employed artist who needs to connect with customers online because they want to sell their paintings outside of their city. Pause the video and start your timer. Remember, spend 1 minute on each idea and sketch possible solutions to solve Dakota's problem. Congratulations! You just did Crazy 8s. How did that feel? Were you able to come up with 8 different ideas? The Crazy 8s exercise is great practice for any design problem you need to solve. The sketching and ideating both get easier the more you do it. A great way to learn is to get feedback on your ideas. So if you'd like, take a photo of your completed Crazy 8s grid and share it on a discussion forum. Or do the exercise again with a different problem statement. That's a wrap. Now it's your turn to ideate using How Might We and Crazy 8s for your portfolio project. Have fun with it and get creative. Hey there! It's time to start thinking about how your website should be organized to best meet your users' needs. This is called the information architecture of your website design. You may recall from an earlier course in this program that information architecture, or IA, organizes content to help users understand where they are in a product and where the information they want is. Effective information architecture is key to creating a seamless user journey. To make sure your website is easy to use, your information architecture should be informed by many sources, like user research and competitive audits that examine the way existing products in the market are structured. Knowing your users, their goals, and their behaviors is really important for creating an effective IA. So why is creating information architecture an important part of UX design? First, IA can organize and define the structure for your website. An organized website is easy to navigate. Also, IA can provide a high-level view of a product. Understanding how the elements of a website fit together and relate to each other can improve your design process. In addition, IA helps stakeholders review your designs. Stakeholders can evaluate whether the content in the site or the app is the correct type of content and if it's placed in the appropriate places to help achieve business or product goals. Next, IA can help engineers understand how to organize the data, so the eventual development of the product matches the visual designs you've created. So not only will your users benefit from good IA, it will make your colleagues' jobs easier too. In addition, messy IA can add time to the web development process, and you don't always have time to spare. And finally, IA can allow your ideas to grow and iterate with the design. The ability to adapt your approach during different stages of a project is a key skill for UX designers. In order to build information architecture that can meet your users' needs, you need to be able to organize your content effectively. There are 4 common ways that websites are structured, which we'll cover in the next video. So let's keep going. Hey there. So I've got a question for you. How many hours do you think you spend online in a given week? According to a 2018 study conducted by the University of Southern California, the average American spends 24 hours a week online. That means that scrolling, searching, and swiping our way through the internet takes up the same amount of time as a part-time job. Fortunately, common website structures help us browse more quickly. It doesn't matter if you're searching for a pediatrician or checking out the latest news. Odds are that every website you come across uses familiar information architecture. These aren't accidents, these are site structures. There are 4 common site structures: hierarchical, sequential, matrix, and database. Each of these structures is unique and serves a specific purpose. Let's learn about them. The hierarchical model is one of the most popular website structures. It's a top-down approach to structure that starts with top-level categories of information, referred to as the parent level. Then content is narrowed into more detailed information, called the child level. This structure is very similar to a family tree, which is what the parent and child level terms are based on. The first page of a hierarchical website is the home page, where users start. This is represented by the page 1 at the top of a tree. The next level contains pages for the main categories of content. On a website, these categories usually appear in a navigation bar at the top of the home page. This is represented by pages 2, 3, and 4 in the diagram. Often, when you hover your mouse over one of the categories in the navigation bar or click on that category, a list of additional pages within that category appears. Each of these pages is considered a child of the parent category. For example, page 5 and page 6 are considered child pages of page 2. HBO.com is a good example of the hierarchical model. The website homepage offers main categories like series, movies, and docs at the parent level across the top of the homepage. If I click on one of the category pages like series, the site offers subcategory pages at the child level like featured series, specials, and sports. You might have guessed that the hierarchical model gets its name from the word hierarchy. In UX design, hierarchy means organizing your content by importance. What's the most important and what's the least important? And how do you connect this content together? A second common website structure is sequential. A sequential model is a website structure that leads users through a step-by-step process. Sequential websites order their pages from a starting page to an endpoint, sort of in a line. Users start on the site's first page and click a link or button to go to the next page in the order. Users continue this pattern, clicking through the pages in order until they've reached the last page. In a true sequential structure, like in an online survey, users aren't able to navigate to pages out of order. They can navigate between the next and previous page, but they aren't able to skip over pages or go to a home page. So think of this. Have you ever tried to find car insurance online? Almost all insurance sites are sequential forms to get a quote. The purpose of each page in a website that uses a sequential structure is to get users to the next step in the sequence, moving them toward an end goal. Okay, next up is a matrix model. The matrix model is a structure that allows users to follow their own path, since content is linked in several different ways. Users can navigate to any page in a matrix model website and still be able to access all of the other pages as well. This allows users to explore the site freely. Because all the content links to each other, the matrix model is sometimes referred to as the web model. Think about the homepage of a news website. Chances are the website has a navigation menu at the top, the most recent content front and center on the page, and then other news stories sorted into linked categories below. If you click on a news story, you'll find other related articles linked throughout the article. For example, if you're reading about a news story in a local zoo, you might find that a related story about an animal rescue is hyperlinked within the text. Other articles that might interest you are usually included at the bottom or to the side of the page too. Try pulling up your favorite news website now to check this out. One pro tip to keep in mind: this matrix model structure is considered outdated by some UX designers. Matrix models don't provide a great user experience because they can be tricky to navigate if you don't already know what you're looking for. Despite this, matrix models are still in use by many popular websites that want users to interact with a lot of the website's content, instead of sending the user on a specific journey. Finally, we have the database model. The database model is a website structure that mixes a database or an organized collection of information with search functionality. A database model creates a dynamic experience for users that includes advanced filtering and search capabilities. Think about your favorite social media network. Most social media sites offer the ability to post content with tags, like a location that categorizes the content. Users can search for content using these tags. Or think about the Google Maps website. When you land on the homepage, the main option you are presented with is to search the database for an address or a category of locations like restaurants. All right, so there you have it. 4 common website structures: hierarchical, sequential, matrix, and database. Aligning the structure of your website with one or more of these models has a few advantages. First, users have expectations for how websites work based on their prior experience using other websites. Site structure models, like the 4 we just discussed, make sure that your website meets those user expectations. Second, structure models improve navigation of websites as they add organization. Following a website structure model makes it easier for you, as a designer, to build in logical cues that orient and direct your users. And third, these structure models have been tested over time and have proven their effectiveness. They've evolved based on feedback from users and designers. They allow you to start building websites more quickly and efficiently too, since you aren't spending time inventing a structure from scratch. By now, you might be wondering which structure is best for your website design project. The answer to that question depends on your website and your users' needs. Most website structures are a combination of a couple of the structures we've introduced. It's common to blend or combine website structures to fit the needs for a specific project. That's the fun part of website design. You get to build a site that suits the specific needs of your users. One last thing to keep in mind, you may need to go beyond these models if you land a job at a brand or agency and they want to create something unique. Remember, these common structures are just a starting point. No matter the structure, the user needs to be able to easily and effectively navigate your website. All right, that's it for now. Hello again. You're well on your way to understanding how information architecture comes into play for websites. It's time to take everything you've learned about website structures and put it into practice. In this video, we're going to discuss how to incorporate clear information architecture into your designs using a sitemap. A sitemap is a diagram of a website or an app that shows how pages are prioritized, linked, and labeled. When planning your website in its early stages, it's important to create a clear organizational path. By mapping an outline, you can see which areas of your site may require more elaborate connectivity to help users reach the necessary pages. It's also a great way to see all of your pages as a whole in the order they will appear on your site to users. You might spot necessary pages you've forgotten or realize you need to remove and condense pages. Here's an example of how a sitemap might come to life. Notice how it's a bunch of lines and rectangles. The rectangle at the top might represent the home page because it's the page you want users to start on when they enter your website. Below the home page is a row of rectangles that are each attached to the home page by a line. This row of rectangles represents the different categories of your website. Finally, each category has a column of rectangles attached to it by lines. This column of rectangles represents the subcategories of that category. The sitemap might look familiar because it would be used for a website with a hierarchical structure. Besides helping users move from page to page, sitemaps help search engines index your website. If you ever wondered how a search engine like Google knows about all of the websites it lists on a search results page, this is how. Sitemaps tell Google what a site is about and what content it includes. The indexing process makes your site searchable and available to a whole new set of users. Users that may not have found your website on their own. A clear organizational structure is also important for accessibility. Users of all abilities, identities, and experiences need to be able to successfully move through your website's design. Sitemaps create an organized flow that takes your users from one task to the next. This is especially important for any users interacting with your site using assistive technology. Organizing your site using a clear structure allows all site visitors, including those using assistive technologies, to navigate your site more efficiently. Now you know the value of sitemaps. Coming up, I'll show you how to build a sitemap for your website using the library website as an example. Let's go. Hey there, you just learned how sitemaps help improve the user experience on websites. Now let's discuss how to actually create a sitemap in the real world. To get started, there are a couple of things to think about. First, think about pages that are commonly found on websites. You might think of a home page, which almost every website has, or a product description page that has details about an item you want to buy. Or you might even think about a shopping cart page that shows you a list of items you're about to purchase. There are lots of pages like these that are common across websites, so start to pay attention to the websites you browse. The good news is you've actually already started to do this. Think about the websites you reviewed during the competitive audit. Were there common pages that each of your competitors' websites had? For example, during my competitive audit of library websites, I noticed that most library websites had a search results page with a list of books that met the search criteria. So when I create my sitemap, I'll probably want to include a search results page, like a list of books. Second, recall the information you already know about your users. At this point in the design process, you've already done quite a bit of research, like empathy maps, personas, user stories, and user journey maps. You should know the users of your website pretty well. You'll want to keep your users' problem and goals in mind as you create your sitemap to ensure that users get what they need from your site. For the library website, I'll recall the user journey map that I built for Shane. I want to apply their journey to the sitemap I'm going to create. My focus will be on the actions that Shane takes as they browse the library website. As a reminder, Shane needs to browse a catalogue of books, choose the book they're interested in reading, try to reserve the book, join a waitlist if the book is not immediately available, and then pick up the book from the library. With all this information in mind, you're ready to put pen to paper, so to speak. It's time to decide the structure that your website will use: hierarchical, sequential, matrix, or database. Remember, you might use a combination of these structures or a different structure altogether. For the library website, I'm going to start with a hierarchical structure. This is because I have one top-level page, the home page, with pages hanging off it that users can easily find their way to. Here's a pro tip. If you start your sitemap with a common website structure in mind, you can use a template like this to kickstart the process. Okay, we often start with the home page of the website and create the rest of the sitemap from there. The home page is the access point for your website and the first part of your product that the users will experience. So I'll add a home page to the box at the top of my sitemap. Next, it's time to name the main categories of content on my website. Those categories are what I will add to the row of blue rectangles, which are connected to my home page. Remember, on a website, these categories usually appear in a navigation bar at the top of the home page. For the library website, I know there needs to be a page for users to browse books, so I'll add books to the first blue rectangle. In addition, users need a place to keep track of the books they want to check out. I'll call that the checkout cart. Also, I noticed on a lot of competitor library websites that there was a clear user account page. Having a user account page is often good practice on websites to help users easily keep track of their activity on the website. Finally, users might want to know a bit about the library and events that are coming up there, so I'll add an About page section as the fourth blue rectangle. Keep in mind, your website probably won't have exactly 4 categories, or blue rectangles in this case. This is just a starting point to help you get the hang of sitemaps. Okay, with these main categories in mind, I'm ready to start adding subcategories. In other words, I'll fill out the column of grey rectangles that comes below each blue rectangle. Remember, these are also called child pages that are attached to the parent page. Let's start with the books page, where users can browse a list of library books. Website pages within this category might include recent releases, most popular books, or recommendations for books based on what the user has already read. I'll add these 3 subcategories to the grey rectangles beneath the books category. When you create your own sitemap, you would continue to add subcategories like this for each of the categories you outlined for your website. And ta-da! Here's what the finished sitemap might look like for the library website. Keep in mind, I'll likely change some of these pages, condense them, move them around, but this is the beginning of a process that will help me start to envision the structure of my website. Building a sitemap means thinking about all the steps and decisions a user makes when they come to your website. A well-defined sitemap can orient your user and help improve site navigation. Creating a sitemap can also help you spot areas of improvement in your navigation and any important pages that were overlooked before beginning your design phase. Catching these mistakes early can save your team time and money later. Well, that's it for now. You're getting the hang of sitemaps, so it's time to create your own. Good luck. Congratulations! You've made it through the empathize, define, and ideate stages of the design process. You are on your way to designing a website that you can include in your portfolio. In this part of the course, you've learned how to conduct a competitive audit and use that audit to ideate. You also came up with lots of ideas for your website designs using ideation techniques like How Might We and Crazy Eights. Then you explored the importance of planning information architecture for your website and common website structures. Finally, you learned how to build a sitemap for your website. Remember, 90% of UX designers reported that they had recently worked on a website or web-based application. So knowing how to use common website structures and build sitemaps for your website are essential skills to have as you start your career in UX design. Whew, that's a pretty impressive foundation you built there. I bet you're ready for more. Up next, we'll take our ideation and planning to the next level by building wireframes for our websites in Adobe XD. And I'll meet you there. Hey there, and welcome back. Now that you've empathized with users, defined the user's problem to solve, and begun to ideate on possible solutions, it's time to bring those ideas to life in a wireframe. The wireframes you'll design in this course are for responsive websites. It's important to keep in mind that your website will have different layouts depending on the device and the screen size you're designing for. In other words, if you're creating a wireframe for a desktop or a laptop computer, you'll have a lot more space on the screen and therefore a lot more flexibility than if you're designing for like a mobile phone screen. So to learn how to create wireframes for a responsive website, we'll start with some basics, like common website layouts. Next, we'll examine how to build paper wireframes for websites, and you'll create paper wireframes for your own website. After that, we'll discuss how to plot responsive website layouts using grid paper, and we'll go over a few elements and components that are commonly used in responsive website design. Then, we'll transition to digital wireframes. I'll demonstrate how to build wireframes in Adobe XD for my library website project so that you can create digital wireframes for your own project. Finally, you'll update and refine your wireframes to enhance accessibility, and we'll revisit Gestalt principles to understand how they come into play during wireframing. Get excited, because during this part of the course you'll create paper and digital wireframes of your website designs. You're getting closer and closer to completing your second portfolio project. You ready? Let's get started. In order to better help users navigate and interact with your pages, let's check out some website layouts and best practices that you could use to arrange the elements on your site's homepage. Remember, homepages are the entryway to the contents of a website. They're usually the first page users land on when they arrive at your site. Homepages also provide a central point for user navigation. So how do you lay out a website homepage? As I'm sure you can imagine, there are multiple ways a website homepage can be laid out. So let's check out some of the more common layouts. First up, let's discuss single-column website layouts. As the name implies, single-column layouts have only one column for content. Take a peek at this blog post on Medium. The entire article is in one single vertical column. In this layout, elements tend to be stacked in a logical order, with the navigation at the top, the content next, and maybe a footer just to round things off. As you can imagine, single-column layouts are probably one of the simplest layouts. One more thing to keep in mind, you may notice single-column website layouts frequently on mobile websites. It's a straightforward approach to presenting information to users, especially when you're creating a mobile layout for a website. Second, let's check out websites with multi-column layouts. Multi-column layouts generally have 2 or more columns for content. You've probably encountered this layout on many desktop websites. If the multi-column layout has 2 columns, there's usually a clear focal point. A focal point is a specific and distinct area of the website that captures users' attention. In this example, the Grow with Google website uses images as focal points. Content that supports the focal point takes up anywhere between 25 to 45% of the page. Here, the supporting content is the text to the right of each image. If the multi-column layout has many columns, designers use visual weight to create a good user experience. Or check out this Vietnamese home cooking recipe website that uses 3 columns. Having 3 columns of content means more recipes can be displayed above the fold. Remember, above the fold refers to the content on a web page that doesn't require scrolling to experience. The box layout is a layout that consists of boxes or squares of various sizes and proportions. Box layouts are often found at the main starting point or homepage of a website. In this example, Nordstrom uses boxes to organize different categories of gifts for the holiday season. The box layout allows users to quickly navigate to gifts of varying price points and item types. Using a box layout allows e-commerce websites to easily swap out items that are relevant depending on the season or a sale they want to draw users' attention to. The box layout is often used in UX design portfolios as well. Next up is the featured image layout, which is sometimes referred to as a single image layout. A featured image layout places the user's focus on a single image or video that often takes up the entirety of the page. A featured image layout is popular on many product pages because it's based on the idea that using images in the design is the fastest way to sell a product. The featured image is big and bold, which creates an emotional connection with users and makes a strong first impression. If you choose to use this layout, make sure your featured image is relevant to the message you want to deliver and is high quality. The featured image is often accompanied by a menu bar on the side or top of the page. This menu is often sticky or fixed, which means that the menu stays in place as the users scroll down the page. In this example, Caledon Build, a project management and construction company, uses a featured image that takes up the whole top of their homepage website. All right, let's explore some more popular website layouts. Up next, asymmetrical layouts. Asymmetrical layouts have purposeful imbalance between different sides of a page. You may use an asymmetrical layout to place emphasis on certain parts of the page, such as images or headlines. Two common types of asymmetrical layouts are F-shape and Z-shape. These layouts get their names from the path that the user's eyes usually follow across the page. F-shape layouts mean that the pattern users will likely browse content on the page follows the shape of an F. An F-shaped layout is commonly used to present a lot of material on a single page. The F-shaped layout allows users to scan the information quickly. This layout is often used on search result pages like this one. The user follows the shape of the F as they explore the page. On the other hand, a Z-shape is where users skim information starting left to right, then move diagonally to the left before scanning to the right again, like the letter Z. It also imitates the natural scanning pattern of Western users who read left to right and top to bottom. Z-shaped layouts are typically used for sites with less content like this. Keep in mind, anyone with a visual impairment would need accessibility support to navigate the page, but they would follow the same Z or F-shaped pattern through the information. Last but not least, let's talk about one more common website layout, a grid of cards. A grid of cards layout features a series of cards that provide previews of more detailed content. Each card can vary in size, but the cards are often a uniform size. Also, keep in mind that the size of the cards you use may vary depending on the size of the screen you're designing for. You may recognize this website layout from your favorite recipe blogs, streaming service, or other content-heavy websites. Here's an example from Dribbble. The cards are all the same size and preview lots of different content. Other popular websites that use a grid of cards layout are YouTube and Pinterest. And last but not least, let's check out a tiered layer cake. A tiered layer cake is just what it sounds like. It looks like a layered cake with individual rows or layers stacked on top of one another. Within each row, there can be different numbers of columns, and they don't have to be consistent. The tiered layer cake layout is often used in responsive website design, as layers can easily be swapped out or moved around. The tiered layer cake layout differs from a regular multi-column layout in that there is no all-encompassing container or long-running sidebars. There can be multiple columns within a layer though. How does a tiered layer cake layout show up on a real website? Let's check out the Strider Bikes website here. There are clear breaks between each layer, and each layer has a different number of columns, allowing for different combinations of text boxes, icons, and images. Using familiar website design layouts like these makes it easier for users to navigate your website since they've likely encountered the layout before. You'll need to find the layout that works best for your project. Keep in mind that the internet and the UX design industry are constantly changing, and you may notice that common website layouts change too. What's trending right now doesn't necessarily reflect a high level of usability or address accessibility needs. Instead, you should always pick the layout that's best for your users and the project, rather than simply following what's popular at the time. And that's a wrap. Now it's your turn to go and explore some of your favorite websites. What layouts do they use? What do you notice about the user experience when certain layouts are used? Have fun and stay curious. Hey there, welcome back. At this point, you've empathized with your users, defined problem statements that need to be addressed, and started ideating design solutions. Now it's time to explore wireframes. Remember when we mentioned site structure earlier in the course? Now you can start designing each page that will go into that structure, just like a blueprint. As a reminder, a wireframe is an outline or a sketch of a product or screen. As the name might suggest, wireframes are relatively bare bones, consisting primarily of shapes, lines, and minimal text. Wireframes help the designer figure out the layout of the page. A layout is the structure that supports how visual components on a page are arranged. Layouts also demonstrate where each feature of a product fits in with the others and how users will progress from one screen to the next. There are two methods designers can employ when wireframing: paper or digital. Like many UX designers, I normally start sketching my wireframes on paper and later switch to digital. This allows me to work through many iterations faster and throw away the wires that aren't working. It's a good idea to consider implementing industry standards for creating paper wireframes, like representing text with horizontal lines, icons or images as squares with an X overlapping the square, and calls to action like buttons as rectangles or circles. Doing this makes it easier for other designers in the project to understand the purpose of each element in the wireframe. To help us explore a lot of ideas, we often create multiple wireframes for the same screen of an app or website. In this case, I'm going to draw wireframes for the homepage of our library website. The goal is to come up with lots of ideas for the structure of the homepage and the intended function of each element on the homepage. In other words, I'm going to draw wireframes for lots of ways that one screen, the homepage, could work. So let's get started. Before you begin drawing, it's helpful to write a quick list of the information that needs to go on the page you're drawing wireframes for. It's important to list this information up front so you remember to draw all of the elements in each of your wireframes. I'm drawing wireframes for the homepage of the library website. So the information that needs to be included on this page might include a navigation bar across the top of the screen, images of book covers, and text descriptions that call out the title and author of each book. Alright, let's start drawing. It's a good rule of thumb to try to create at least 5 different versions of how to structure information on a page. Remember, at this stage, our goal is to explore lots of ideas with our wireframes. When you sketch, you can use a few sheets of paper, a notebook, or a stylus with a tablet. So I'll grab a few pieces of paper and a pen. First, I'll draw a rectangle to represent the frame of my website. I'm going to start at the top of the page first, at the header. Personally, it's easier for me to design from top to bottom because that's how I experience a web page. But this is a matter of personal preference, and you can begin wherever you want. For the header area of the homepage, I want to include a logo, a few key navigation buttons or links, and a hero image. So in the upper left-hand corner of my wireframe, I'll add a rectangle and the word logo to make this clear to myself or others who might review the wireframe. Next to the logo, I'll add links for search, discover, donate, and about pages, because those are important hyperlinks I need to include for a library-specific website. On the right side of the header, I'll add icons for account and cart. Folks need to know where to find the books to add into the cart, right? It's a common design pattern in left-to-right reading languages like English to put the link to the cart the furthest to the right. After that, I'm going to pop in a placeholder for a hero image below. As a personal design decision, I'd like this hero image to take up the majority of the header area, but not all of it. I'll want some text next to the hero image to explain what the image is all about. Maybe this could be a featured author or a new book release. Remember, we usually draw an X in the boxes to indicate that this is a placeholder for an image. Great, I think that will work. Below that, I want to include a few squares and rectangles that show website visitors the latest books. I'm going to add a long line to create a new area of the page. I'll draw a couple of rectangles with an X inside within this area to show where images might go. I'll also add lines to show a corresponding description to the right of each rectangle. The reason I'm adding these 2 rectangles above the fold is so users will immediately notice them when landing on the home page. Remember, above the fold refers to the content on a web page that doesn't require scrolling to experience. Below the fold, I want to include additional books that a visitor can view right on the home page. I don't know what these books will be yet, but I want a variety of options to cater to different genre preferences. To do that, I'll draw a line to create a new section on my homepage for these books. And inside this rectangle, I want to list 6 books. I'll create 2 groups of 3 rectangles and some lines directly below each of them to indicate the text for the book title, author name, and other relevant information. Last but not least, there's the footer of a page. Generally, the footer is where we add extra information that might be useful for visitors to navigate to, such as the organization's social media pages, terms and conditions, career opportunities, privacy policy, and more things like that. I'll add a few lines to indicate hyperlinks to these pages within the footer. In the footer, I'll also include the logo of the library because I want to show the full version of the logo that has the library name next to it. We'll use a smaller version of the logo in the header to save a bit of space. Alright, my first wireframe is complete. I'm going to create a few other wireframes for the homepage. Remember, it's best practice to create around 5 versions of important pages like the homepage to figure out which features and layouts you like the best. Be creative and try new ideas. You might come up with what feels like a ridiculous layout, but that's how we come up with innovative ideas. Okay, here we go. We'll check out all my wireframes side by side when I'm done. And there we have it. I've created a variety of wireframes for the homepage. Let's review the 5 wireframes I drew, and I'll share my thoughts on each one. One thing I like about my first wireframe, which I called option A, is a large hero image with text next to it. This could be a fun place to introduce an author or a feature collection of books. For option B, I put a really prominent search field in the top right of the homepage. I was thinking about putting a hero image of the library behind it. For option C, I wanted to group the logo, search, and navigation into one floating box. Then I placed other images and text for items like books further down the page. For option D, I thought I might be able to simplify some of the navigation by having the Discover, About, and Donate areas of the site as parts of the actual homepage. Finally, for option E, I decided to think a bit outside the box and create something completely different. I made search super prominent in a kind of a search engine kind of way. Now that I've come up with some ideas in my wireframes, it's as good a time as any to identify which features I like the most. I'll add a star next to the parts of different wireframes that are my favorite. First, in option E, I like the Discover, About, and Donate tabs across the top of the homepage, so I'll add a star next to this feature. I also like this large hero image with the text next to it in option A, so I'll add a star here too. In option D, I like this section of the wireframe that I call Discover to help users find popular books. I'm going to put a star next to these 2 image placeholders and their accompanying text. Finally, in option B, I like the footer that has the logo and placeholders for text. I'll draw one more star here. Great! Now that I've identified the parts of my wireframes that I like the most, I can combine them into one new wireframe. I might draw this new wireframe on paper if I want to keep ideating, or create it in a digital tool when I'm ready to move on. Okay, it's time to take everything you know and create paper wireframes for your own website. In the next activity, you'll sketch designs for a desktop computer screen. Good luck. Hey again. Have you ever noticed when you change the size of your internet browser that the layout of a website changes? Or when you view a website on a mobile phone, the layout on your phone is different from the layout on a desktop computer? Well, that's because the website was built with responsive layout. Responsive web design means crafting changes to the appearance or layout of a website depending on the device being used to view it and the size of the screen. A UX designer planning a website needs to consider how the elements on each page will appear on different size screens. Alright, but why is responsive web design so important? Responsive web designs adapt easily to any screen. This increases usability and creates a good user experience for people visiting the website. Responsive design also drives mobile traffic to your website. After all, not everyone will be visiting your website from a desktop computer, and you want the layout of your website to work for users no matter what device they use. In addition, responsive design saves money and time because you don't have to design a website for every device size. Let's examine a responsive website in action. Remember this Vietnamese home cooking recipes website from earlier? Let's compare the desserts page of this website on a desktop computer to the desserts page on a mobile phone. On the desktop, the website uses a 4-column layout, taking full advantage of the bigger screen. On the mobile device, it switches to a single-column layout for a better user experience. If I flip the phone to a horizontal orientation, the layout of the page changes too. Pretty neat, right? That's the magic of responsive design. Now, how do you, as a UX designer, apply responsive design to a website? It takes a bit of planning, and it begins with the wireframes that you've already created. For example, let's take a wireframe that I created earlier where I combined all of my favorite features of the library website homepage. I'll plot it on some dot paper to get a feel for how the design might appear on a mobile screen. The dot grid or paper makes it easy for you to shrink or scale elements of the wireframe in a consistent way. Since mobile phone screens are significantly smaller and more narrow than desktop computer screens, I have to create a narrower version of the wireframe I drew earlier. Desktops are clearly larger than mobile, so I'll scale down my wireframe to approximately 1/3 the size for mobile. Okay, here we go. Check this out. Alright, my wireframe is complete. I usually draw this on A5 paper, which is fairly small, so sometimes when I draw mobile phone screens like this, the sketch spans across 2 pages. No worries though, I can just tear out these pages and put them together like this. Notice how different the layouts in my two wireframes look for desktop and mobile websites? Keep in mind, I'll also want to draw wireframes for all of the screen sizes in between the desktop and mobile, like a tablet or a desktop computer with a smaller browser size. You'll want to plot responsive layouts for the most important pages of your own website, in addition to the home page. Doing this helps to make sure that the layouts for each of your pages provide a good user experience. I'll meet you in the next video. Hi there. You're learning all about responsive layouts to make sure that your website design provides a good user experience, no matter the device or screen size being used to view it. At this point, you've already created wireframes for the desktop version of your website. Now you're getting ready to create responsive layouts for smaller screen sizes, like a mobile phone or tablet. When you try to adapt a desktop website for a smaller screen, there's less digital real estate on the page to place icons, images, and text. That means details need to be scaled down to meet accessibility standards and ensure a good user experience. You may also need to reduce the size of text across your website to ensure it fits on the smaller screen and still looks good. Using common, easily recognizable elements and components can help users interact with your product in an intuitive way. So let's discuss 3 of them. First up is a popular navigation design icon that you've probably encountered in your favorite mobile websites, a hamburger menu. Hamburger menus are a type of navigation menu that is represented by an icon with 3 lines. It kind of looks like a hamburger. When you click on this icon, it unfolds by either sliding in from the side or taking over the whole page, revealing a menu of options that allows you to navigate through the pages. Hamburger menus are useful to hide information in order to keep the user's attention focused on the primary content of the web page. Next, cards are a common component used in responsive designs. Cards are surfaces that contain content and actions about a single subject. Cards should be easy to scan for relevant and actionable information. Elements like text and images should be placed on them in a way that clearly indicates hierarchy. Here's a quick example. This mobile website uses cards to provide information about different video files you can download and watch. Placing the cards in a consistent pattern makes it easy for users to quickly scan the page. Another common component used in responsive design websites is a carousel. You may also know them as slideshows. Carousels are scrollable feeds of images or cards that can be sifted through with a click or automatically loop while you're on the page. Carousels are often used on websites with lots of images, like a photography gallery, to help place more images above the fold. Carousels are also commonly used on mobile sites to help condense a layout to fit a smaller screen size. So let's check out an example. Here, a carousel is used to present the featured products on the website. Sometimes e-commerce websites or online retailers use carousels to show users the most popular items purchased by the consumers. So that's it. Now you know a few elements and components that are commonly used in responsive designs. As you create wireframes for smaller screens, consider implementing one or more of these into your own designs. Happy drawing! Hey there! By this point, you've created a few iterations of your paper wireframes. You've even explored responsive designs in your wireframes by sketching for different screen sizes. After you've explored multiple ideas for wireframes on paper and you understand which wireframe elements will provide the best user experience, it's time to bring your paper wireframe to life digitally. While drawing wireframes on paper is fast and inexpensive, things get a little trickier when we move to digital wireframes. So make sure you feel good about your paper wireframes before you move on to the next step. To determine if you're ready to transition your paper wireframes to digital, ask yourself a few questions. 1. Do you have an idea of the layout you're aiming for? 2. Have you received feedback from peers or managers on your paper wireframes? And 3. Are you ready to consider basic visual cues like size, text, and typography, or other visual elements like content or images? If you answered yes to all 3 of these questions, then you're ready to start creating a digital version of your paper wireframes. But here's one tip. Be sure to hang on to those paper wireframes for your portfolio so you can showcase your full design process. In the next video, you'll learn how to create and adjust columns, grids, and gutters in Adobe XD. Just like you use dot or grid paper to lay out your paper wireframes, you'll use these features to lay out your digital wireframes. Hi, welcome back. As we discussed in an earlier video, Adobe XD gives us the tools to design and prototype websites, apps, and more. I'll take the paper wireframes I already created on paper and turn them into digital wireframes now. For now, I'm only going to show you how to create a digital wireframe of the desktop version of the library website homepage. As a reminder, I laid out my homepage using a layer cake structure because I want to order the content by order of importance. This structure will help draw attention to the content above the fold. One last thing to note before we jump in, the digital wireframes I'm about to create in Adobe XD will be a little higher fidelity than the wireframes Karen created in an earlier course for the Dog Walker app. For example, I may use a few more keywords or lorem ipsum text instead of lines that represent text. Okay, so let's open XD and pick up where we left off. Aha, here we go. Remember when we worked in Adobe XD earlier in the course? I added a desktop-sized artboard to the canvas and specified a layout grid, which included customizing the columns, gutters, and margins. So I'm not going to need this text box and rectangle. I want to start my digital wireframe from scratch, so let me delete those quickly. Before I get started, I'm going to upload a photo of my paper wires into Adobe XD. This will make it easy for me to refer back to them as I design my digital wireframes. You can start building your digital wireframe anywhere on the artboard, but for me it's easier to build from top to bottom. Using my paper wireframe as guidance, I'll begin by building the general outline of the entire homepage with various squares and rectangles. I'll start by using the rectangle tool to draw the 4 large rectangles that make up the outline of my layer cake design layout. Now, I need to decide on the navigation pattern I want to implement. For this design, I think a sticky top navigation bar would be a good idea. A sticky top navigation bar doesn't move as the users scroll down and always stays at the top of the page. As I imagine search results can get quite long for a library, I don't want users to have to scroll all the way back up if they want to switch to a different page of the website. First, I'll add a narrow rectangle across the top of the page to represent the top navigation bar. Here's a pro tip. The rectangle is already filled in white, which makes the wireframing quick. Next, I'll draw a square in the left side of the navigation bar and I'll fill it in black. This square will represent the library logo that I'll add in later. Then, I'll select the text tool and add the word search to the right of the logo to represent a tab that will link to a different page of the website. I'll continue to fill out the top navigation bar here, including discover, donate, and about. Now that I have all 4 words, let me make sure they're spaced evenly and aligned vertically. There we go. On the other side of the top navigation bar, I'm going to add 2 tabs that are called Account and Basket. I might even add a number, like 3, to the text here to show that there are 3 items in my basket. This is just something fun to make the wireframe seem more realistic. Next, I'm going to create the hero image part of the wireframe. I'll use the rectangle tool to create a new rectangle for the hero image below the navigation. Then, I'll create a second rectangle next to it and fill it grey. This is where I'll add the text to describe the hero image. Now I'm going to add 2 text boxes to describe the hero image. Since I'm not sure what the text will say yet, I can use lorem ipsum as placeholder text. To differentiate between the header and the regular text, I'll make the header a larger font size. And there we have it. Above these 2 text boxes, I'll add another small text box to indicate what I want the hero image to feature. I'll type featured author into this text box. For the next 2 layers of the website, I'll use repeated groups of similar sized rectangles and text boxes. I want to make a little bit more space for my book covers, so I'm going to need to make my artboard a little bit longer. I can do this by clicking on the selection tool and dragging the height of my artboard. I'm now just going to resize a couple of these rectangles to make more space for these larger book covers. Okay, now back to creating those books. Next to the book, I'll place 3 text boxes to represent the book title, the author's name, and a short description of the book. I'll add lorem ipsum text for all three of these, and I'll make sure each of them is a different sized font. Now I'm going to use the selection tool and click on each of the elements I want to group together while holding down the Shift key. Once I have all the elements highlighted, I'll select the Repeat Grid button option from the top of the right side panel. From here, I'm going to use a neat Adobe XD feature called Repeat Grid, which allows me to select a group of items and instantly duplicate them across my artboard, like so. Ta-da! Did you see how easy that was? So much faster than copying and pasting. Great. This layer is looking good. I can now follow a similar process to create a group of rectangle book covers and accompanying text for the layer below. To do this, I'll draw one vertical rectangle using the rectangle tool and then make two copies of it. I'll need to make sure the three rectangles are evenly spaced. I'll add a couple of tiny text boxes below each book for the title and the author. Finally, above the group of books, I'll add a long text box that will indicate the book category. Now I'm going to use the selection tool again and click on each of the elements that I want to group together while holding down the Shift key. Just like last time, once I have all the elements highlighted, I'll click on the Repeat Grid button and then drag the vertical green bar to the right to make additional copies of the group appear. And you can see that there's not enough space between these book covers, so I can hover over the Repeat Grid and then just increase that spacing between them, like this. As you might have noticed, I added an extra group to the third layer here. There's plenty of digital real estate in a desktop website like I'm designing, so I have the space to showcase a few of the book titles that users might be interested in renting from the library. How exciting! The wireframe is starting to come together. I love this part of the process where my ideas are taking form. There's one thing left to do: add the footer to the final layer at the bottom of the page. And here's a pro tip. A lot of organizations include a simple version of their logo at the top of the home page, like I did in the sticky top navigation bar. But at the bottom of the home page in the footer, you can include a more detailed or larger version of the logo. I'll add a rectangle to represent this logo, and I'll fill it in black. Below the logo, I'll add 4 small squares to represent social media icons. You may have noticed this on web pages you've explored. Many organizations like to include links out to their profiles on social media to drive traffic and followers. Finally, I'll add a few text boxes with lorem ipsum text to the footer. Later, I might add information here like the library's address or links to other libraries nearby that are part of the same chain. Bingo! My digital wireframe for the desktop version of the library website is now complete. Keep in mind, moving from your paper wireframes to digital wireframes might not be a perfect process. Sometimes the elements you drew in your paper wireframe won't fit on the screen when you make a digital wireframe. Or you might want to change the design. That's okay and completely normal. And there you have it. You now know how to use Adobe XD to create digital wireframes for the desktop version of your website. Creating digital wireframes can be a little time consuming, but it's well worth it to create a more refined version of the wires you drew on paper. Now it's your turn. Open Adobe XD and get started with your digital wireframes for a desktop screen size. Enjoy! We just finished our digital wireframes for the desktop. Since we're designing a responsive website, I also need to think about what these pages will look like on a smaller device, like a mobile phone. Unfortunately, we don't get this functionality automatically, so we need to design for the smaller screen size ourselves. Let's take a look at an example of responsive design on the web with the Grow with Google homepage. You can see here as I resize this desktop website, content reflows on the page to allow for the smaller screen size. You can fit a lot more content on a desktop web page at one time than you can on a phone, so we need to think about how our content and controls should appear on a smaller screen. So let's get started. I'll pull up Adobe XD, and next to my homepage wireframe for a desktop, I'm going to add another artboard in a mobile phone size. Now I'm ready to think through how to transform my library website design for a smaller screen size. I'll start at the top and work my way down. At the top of my desktop website, I have a navigation bar, and this is too big to fit on a mobile phone screen. I still want a top nav bar, but I'll hide all the menu options underneath the hamburger menu in the top left. I'll plan to use an overlay that pops up when a user clicks on the menu, and from there the user can access these actions. Since the hamburger menu is usually found at the top left of the phone screen, I'll need to move the logo to the middle of the screen to compensate. The other two things I think people will still want access to are search and the basket. So I'll turn these into icons and also include them in the top nav bar on the right side. I'll keep the basket on the far right so it feels familiar and consistent with the desktop site. I'll put these in as circles for the moment since this is a wireframe. Moving down the page, I have the featured author section. I can't do a two-column layout on the mobile phone screen like I did on desktop, so I'll put my hero image at the top and have the accompanying text descriptor right below it. The next section is the popular at WCL section. On my desktop screen, this is very horizontal, so I need to flip it to be vertical. So instead of my books being side by side, I'll place them one above another. The featured collections section is similar. Instead of having each collection side by side, I'll also place these one above the other. I'll add a couple of tiny text boxes below each book for the title and the author. Once I have all the elements highlighted, I'll select the Repeat Grid button option from the top of the right side panel, which allows me to select a group of items and instantly duplicate them across my artboard, like so. Did you see how easy that was? So much faster than copying and pasting. Finally, for the footer, I still want the library logo to be the first thing people notice, so I'll put that into the footer first. I also need the contact information for other library branches. And finally, I can put the social media icons at the very bottom of the footer. All right, I now have a wireframe for the homepage of my website for a mobile phone. I now need to follow the same process for each of the additional artboards. You'll need to do the same exercise for additional screen sizes like a tablet. Adapting the design to make it responsive forces you to prioritize page layout and decide what's really essential for the user and how to group that information. In your portfolio, you'll want to show important pages like your homepage in multiple screen sizes. Great. Now's the time to take what you learned in this video and apply it to your website wireframes. Try designing your own narrow view wireframe. Next, my colleague Shabby is going to show you how to refine wireframes to enhance accessibility.
My name is Jay, and I'm a visual designer at Google. A visual designer is someone who is a strong brand advocate, someone who creates clear user interfaces that allow people to accurately predict how a product is going to work through visual consistency and patterns. It's an exciting time to be a designer right now. There are so many design tools that seem to be coming out of the woodwork every month. Adobe XD was one that really caught my eye at the beginning. I was able to take my visual design vision and my brand style guide and really focus in on micro interactions and make a prototype that not only looked on brand, but interacted at a fidelity that engineers could instantly know how I was actually hoping to build this product at the end of the day. So I've used Adobe XD and Figma and other design tools to kind of quickly create prototypes, test them out with users, but also deliver very high fidelity working prototypes to engineers so they can understand the intention of how this should work, how it should interact, and how we're leveraging some common components and where we're going to really polish and innovate and push the needle. Learning any new design tool is pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of interface patterns that you kind of have to learn. You have to figure out exactly what the process is, but it's also kind of fun. I usually try to learn a product quickly by looking to a design that I admire, and I try to recreate that in the product from beginning to end, from sketches and wireframes to a prototype. I show it to people, get some feedback, and even go as high as I can in fidelity to make sure that it's still on brand and it's using common patterns as much as possible. I think it's really exciting to kind of dive into a tool. One thing that I've learned over the years is that it's not so much about the tool. Ultimately, they're trying to make your job a little bit easier. They're trying to hopefully reduce the number of steps that you have to take to accomplish something. So especially with Adobe XD, with some of these newer tools, there's some rough edges, but I try not to focus too much on the tool so much. I just try to focus on the process and the ideas and trying to accurately, get my idea out there as fast as possible in front of people as quickly as I can. And I think, any design tool right now can accomplish that. It's just kind of learning some of the nuances of where things are at. But I try not to get too tied to it because it's going to change next month anyway.
Hi again. As you're creating digital wireframes in your website, it's important to keep accessibility considerations top of mind. Remember, users of all abilities, identities, and experiences need to be able to successfully move through your design. And understanding how people with disabilities use your product is a crucial part of the UX design process. There are a few features to include in your wireframes to ensure that people using assistive technology have a great user experience. First, let's talk about headings. Headings are titles or subtitles that stand out at the beginning of a paragraph, article, section, or another area of a website. Header text is often larger and bolder than the text on the rest of a page and designates the beginning of a section. Headings can be used to label menus, page titles, subtitles, and other related structures on a page. One reason it's important to make sure headings are clear in your designs is because all users can benefit from headings. Headings support visual hierarchy as well as support efficient navigation for users of screen readers. Screen readers can navigate a web page through headings, which allows users to listen to a list of all headings or jump to a desired heading to begin reading at that point on the website. Users can use the screen reader headings menu to move around to key sections of the web page. Let's check out the library website to see how this works in practice. At the top of the web page, I included a featured author section. I added a heading to this section called Featured Author. I'll need to make sure developers know which heading tag to use in the HTML implementation. To do this, I'll make an annotation in my wireframes that this is an H2 heading since it is a subcategory of a greater article. I'll repeat this process for my two other content blocks, popular at WCL and featured collections. As you continue refining your wireframes, consider annotating various sections to serve as personal reminders. Using placeholder words like heading, subtitle, or page title will be helpful for your own reference as well as when you determine the appropriate heading tag. Another feature to include in your wireframes is a landmark. Landmarks are features used to map out regions of an interface. Headings, which we just discussed, serve a similar purpose to landmarks. Landmarks are used by assistive technology, like screen readers, to provide cues for navigation, allowing users to efficiently move from one section to another. Common landmarks include navigation bars, search boxes, fixed sidebars, and footers. Much like landmarks in real life, these objects or sections stand out from the rest of the page to help users navigate through a website. For example, iOS devices utilize the VoiceOver screen reader. It features a rotor that users can control by pressing the keys Control-Option-U. This rotor tool allows users to browse web pages and switch between landmarks and headings for ease of navigation. Okay, let's check out one more feature to include in your wireframes to ensure that people using assistive technology have a great user experience. Initial focus is how you attract a user's attention to help them accomplish a task. If your web page requires the user to do several things, it's best to direct focus to the top of the page or to the first H1 heading. To understand how this is used in real life, let's check out the Google homepage. The homepage of Google Search features the search bar at the center of the page below a single hero image. This positioning ensures the user's attention is directed towards the search function. But the idea behind the initial focus isn't just to attract the user's attention. Focus can also help define the primary tasks or actions you want a user to take. Although there are other links on the Google search page, defining the search bar as the initial focus supports the central purpose of the page. In general, the less clutter there is on a web page, the easier the interface is to navigate. Otherwise, a user might experience cognitive overload, too much information, or too many tasks simultaneously, resulting in the user not being able to complete the task. A good user experience design has the power to help users of all abilities, identities, and experiences move easily through a product. Keep features like headings, landmarks, and initial focus in mind as you create your digital wireframes and high-fidelity designs to help users navigate your website with ease. Now, take some time to review your digital wireframes and find ways to apply these features in your own work.
Hey there! As you continue to create and refine your digital wireframes, there's one more thing I want you to keep in mind: Gestalt principles. If you've been taking the courses of the certificate program in order, you'll remember Gestalt principles from our earlier work in wireframes and mockups. As a reminder, Gestalt principles describe how humans group similar elements, recognize patterns, and simplify complex images when we perceive objects. You can use the principles to organize content on apps and websites so it's visually pleasing and easier to understand. Basically, humans naturally notice the whole of something before noticing the parts. We do this in order to mentally connect the dots between separate objects and create a cohesive story in our minds. Okay, so let's talk about a Gestalt principle that's particularly relevant to our wireframes: similarity. Remember, similarity means that elements that look similar are perceived to have the same function. Elements might look similar based on their shape, size, or color. Let's check out how the principle of similarity came to life in my wireframes of the Wisconsin County Library website. In the popular at WCL section of the homepage, there are two areas that have a rectangle for a book and accompanying text for the book title, author, and description. Notice how these two groups are identical in size and shape? Because these two groups look similar, users can tell they have the same function. For example, both of the rectangles will have an image of a book cover, and both of the first rows of text will have the book's title. This also makes it easy for users to quickly understand the information we're presenting. For example, the book titles look the same in both of these groups. All right, let's investigate a second Gestalt principle that can help inform our wireframes: proximity. Proximity is a perception that elements that are close together appear to be more related than those that are spaced apart. In my wireframes of the Wisconsin County Library website, we can find the principle of proximity in action. Here's one. Notice the groups of three rectangles under the Featured Collections header. The first group of 3 rectangles is spaced close together, which indicates that they're related. The second group of 3 rectangles is spaced apart from the first group, which means the 2 groups are less related. In other words, the first group of 3 rectangles might be booked within the same collection, while the second group of 3 rectangles are booked in a different collection. Okay, so how about one more Gestalt principle? Do you remember common region? The principle of common region states that elements located within the same area are perceived to be grouped together. Let's go back to the library website again and check out the Featured Author section at the top of the homepage. Within the Featured Author box is a header, title, and descriptor text. The border around the box indicates to users that this information is related. For example, the text in this area will all be about the featured author who is shown in the hero image to the left. Keep in mind, there are many more Gestalt principles to explore and apply to your wireframes. These are just 3 of them to get your creative juices flowing. With these Gestalt principles in mind, are there things you'll change in your own wireframes? For example, are there elements in your wireframes that you want to appear related that you'll now move closer together? If so, you're utilizing the principle of proximity. Good luck with your designs. Woohoo! Congratulations! You've successfully explored a number of best practices for wireframing. Let's quickly recap all that you've learned in this part of the course. To learn how to create wireframes for a responsive website, we start with some basics like common website layouts. Next, we examined how to build paper wireframes for websites, and you created paper wireframes for your own website. After that, we discussed how to plot responsive website layouts using grid paper, and we went over a few elements and components that are commonly used in responsive website design. Then we transitioned to digital wireframes. I showed you how to build wireframes in Adobe XD for my library website project, and you created digital wireframes for your own project. Finally, you updated and refined your wireframes to enhance accessibility, and you revisited Gestalt principles to understand how they come into play. Possibly the most exciting thing of all, you're getting the hang of a new design tool, Adobe XD. This experience will be great to include in your resume and portfolio since it's listed on a lot of job postings. Coming up, we're going to transition from wireframes into building and testing low-fidelity prototypes. I'll see you soon. Welcome back. Now that you've created digital wireframes in Adobe XD, it's time to build, test, and iterate on low-fidelity prototype. As a refresher, a prototype is an early model of a product that demonstrates functionality. Coming up, you'll learn how to build a low-fidelity prototype in Adobe XD. Then, you'll get feedback about that prototype. You'll learn how to plan a UX research study, conduct a usability study, reduce bias during the study, and analyze and synthesize your research results. Finally, you'll make changes to your low-fidelity prototype in Adobe XD based on your research insights. Improving your product based on user feedback is one of the most important parts of being a UX designer. In your portfolio, employers will want to know about your design thinking process and changes you made based on what you learned. So this part of the course will provide really critical information to include in your portfolio. We've got a lot of fun stuff ahead, so let's get to it. Hi there. If you've been taking the courses of this program in order, you might remember creating low-fidelity prototypes in Figma for your app. Since it's been a while, I thought it might be helpful to go through a quick summary of how to build a low-fidelity prototype. Over the next few videos, we'll be using Adobe XD, so the building process will look a little different from what we covered before. For some of you, this is your first time taking one of our courses. If so, I'd recommend reviewing our previous videos and activities on building low-fidelity prototypes before you move on. That way, you'll have a lot more knowledge on how to build and test your prototype. All of the videos you need to review are linked in the course readings, so check them out if you need them. Okay, let's get started. I mentioned that prototypes are intended for testing our product ideas before we produce the real thing. Prototypes are broken down into 2 categories, low fidelity and high fidelity. Low fidelity prototypes are simple, interactive structures that provide a basic idea of how a product will look and behave. They're used to communicate big picture design concepts and usually don't include finalized design elements or realistic content. High-fidelity prototypes, however, are polished designs that exhibit functionality and closely match the look and feel of the final product. Once designers test and confirm that a low-fidelity prototype works properly, they can create high-fidelity designs. These high-fidelity designs will go through their own testing process. We'll get into high fidelity prototypes later on in the course, but for now, we'll focus on building low fidelity prototypes. On the surface, digital low fidelity prototypes may seem very similar to digital wireframes. They're both simple versions of your product and both contain minimal content. The difference between the two is that wireframes are just blueprints of the product structure, while a low fidelity prototype ties the wireframes together and incorporates functionality and navigation. Designers build low fidelity prototypes once they've designed a wireframe and want to test whether users can successfully navigate the designs to complete a task. Testing prototypes is meant to identify and solve problems related to the function of your website. So far, you've created a basic wireframe for the site. Now it's time to test how the website works with real people and get feedback. That's a wrap on the basics of prototypes. Coming up next, we'll put everything we just reviewed about creating low fidelity prototypes into action in Adobe XD, and I'll meet you there. Hi again. It's time for you to create your own low fidelity prototype in Adobe XD. I'll be working right along with you on the Wisconsin County Library website to show you the ins and outs of creating a lo-fi prototype. As we've discussed, prototypes allow the user to experience how it feels to use your product. Prototypes are helpful when you want to confirm your design decisions with real users or share your designs with stakeholders so that they can get a better understanding of your product. If this is your first time creating a prototype, this will be a fun adventure. You'll put what you've learned into action. If you've created a low fidelity prototype in an earlier course using Figma, don't worry about using a new design tool. Adobe XD provides a set of new impressive features to help meet your prototyping goals. Let's get to it. Let me open up my project in Adobe XD. The last time I worked with the Wisconsin County Library website, I created wireframes. Now it's time to convert these static designs into an interactive, low-fidelity prototype. You might notice that I've added a few things to my digital wireframe since you last saw them, like the library logo and some text on important buttons. This will help users and stakeholders understand critical information that's necessary to move through the user flow. When I open my project, the first thing I need to do is switch the tab at the top left from design mode to prototype mode. The screen may look similar in the design and prototype modes, but in prototype mode, I can connect individual elements on my artboards to simulate a user flow through the website. Now I'll click on the homepage artboard. A little grey tab appears at the top left of the artboard. If I'm zoomed in, I'll notice a home icon within this grey tab. I want this screen to be the first screen of my prototype, since it's the homepage, so I'm going to click the home icon to turn it on. The home icon turns blue, which means that this will be the first screen that shows up each time my prototype begins. My goal in connecting these artboards is to allow users to move through the flow of my website pages. I find it easiest to connect my artboards in the order that users would go through the main user flow. So I'll start by selecting the search button at the top of the home page. When I click on the word search here, a blue arrow pops up. I'll click and drag the arrow to my search page artboard. In other words, I'll release the mouse on the screen that I want to connect to the button. This means that when a user clicks on the search button in the prototype, they'll be taken to this search page. Since I'm working on a low fidelity prototype right now, I'm going to use the default settings for interactions in the property inspector on the right side of the screen. At this point in the design process, our goal is to simply make sure the pages transition, but we don't yet need to focus on how the pages transition. Alright, so now I'm on the search page artboard. I need to make something happen when a user clicks the search button. I'll select the search button and I'll drag the arrow to my search result page artboard. On this page, there are lots of search results, or in this case, books. There are a few connections that I need to make on this artboard. I'm going to focus on the third book in the search results list. I'll make all of the connections for this book first. I'll start with a book image. I'll select this book image and drag the arrow to the product description page artboard. Here's a quick pro tip. Product description page is often shortened to PDP. Next, I'm going to connect the group of text that includes a book title and author name to the product description page as well. Finally, I'll connect the reserve button to the second search results page. I'd repeat this process for every book in the search results, but I won't do this now. Okay, so I'm on the second search results artboard. I need to connect the book image and the group accompanying text to the PDP artboard. On the PDP artboard, I'll connect the reserve button to the second PDP artboard. The one thing that changes here is that the reserve button now says in basket, which indicates that the user has selected this book. On the second PDP artboard, I'll connect the basket button in the top right corner here to the basket artboard. And at the bottom of the basket artboard, there's a confirm reservation button, so I'll connect this to the reservations confirmed artboard. All right, now a user can search and reserve a book using my library website. I'll press the play icon at the top right of the screen to preview the prototype I just made. This is where I get really excited because my hard work is coming to life. When I click the play icon, a preview window pops up and my designs are displayed. Now I can click on the buttons I connected and navigate through my prototype just like a real user would. So notice the mouse changes from an arrow to a hand with a pointer finger when I hover over a component that's clickable. You should always double check that your prototype is working correctly before sharing it with others, and especially before you do any testing, like a usability study. If your artboard isn't perfect, don't worry. It takes a lot of practice to know what all the features are that you need in a design to create an effective prototype. You can always go back to your wireframes and add a missing button, text, or anything else you may have forgotten. That's all part of the design process. We're always iterating and improving our designs. Now you have a low fidelity prototype, it's time to test it. In the next video, I'll help you prepare to test your design, and I'll meet you there. Hi there. At this point, you understand low fidelity prototypes and have created a low fidelity prototype in Adobe XD for your own project. It's time to create a research plan to test the main user flow of your website and get feedback from real users. If you've been taking the courses in order, you'll remember exploring research and usability studies in earlier courses. Since it's been a while, I thought it might be helpful to go through a quick summary of how to write a UX research plan before you start your own usability study. If this is the first course of the program that you've taken, you might want to go back and review the videos and complete the activities on conducting a usability study before you move forward. Or even if you just want a little refresher, all the videos that will be most helpful to you are linked in the course reading. Okay, let's get to it. We're ready to review the first step in a UX research study, planning the study. As a reminder, a research plan is a step-by-step examination of a group of users and their needs. A UX research plan is made up of 7 elements: the project background, the research goals, the detailed research questions, the key performance indicators, or KPIs, the methodology, the participants, and the script for the questions you'll ask study participants. So let's break those down. The project background summarizes the situation that led to the need for this research. It's basically a brief explanation about why you're doing the research, which you can give to anyone who asks. Your goal when creating the project background is to try and answer the question, what led you to conduct this research? Next, the research goals lay out what you're trying to solve with this design, or what you'd like the outcomes of the research to be. The goals of your research will differ from project to project. They'll fit into one of 3 categories depending on when during the product lifecycle you conduct the research. Your research goal should answer the question, how will the results of the research impact our design decisions? After that, you'll write detailed research questions for your project. These are the questions you plan to answer during the study. The research questions should be actionable and specific, and you should avoid leading questions. But keep in mind that these should not be the literal questions you plan to ask study participants. Instead, the goal is to figure out what questions you need the study to answer. Next, determine your key performance indicators, or KPIs, which are the critical measures of progress towards an end goal. In a UX research study, you might consider KPIs like the amount of time a user spends on a task, users' use of navigation functionality versus search functionality, user error rates, drop-off rates, and conversion rates, and the system usability scale. That's a questionnaire to measure the usability of your designs. When determining KPIs for your research study, consider the question, what would indicate that we're making progress toward our ultimate goal? Next up is the methodology, where you'll outline the steps you plan to take to conduct your research, including how you'll collect and analyze the data. Then, determine who your study participants will be. Who do you need to be involved in the research to ensure you're studying the right metrics? For example, the usability study for my library website might include participants who read often, want an easier way to check out books, or visit the library as part of their work. Finally, you'll need to write a script for your study. This is also known as a discussion guide. You'll need to determine what questions you want to ask participants during your research. And there you have it, the 7 elements of a UX research plan. Hopefully that brief overview refreshed your memory on how to plan a UX research study. You should be all set to plan a research study to test the main user flow of your own website. If you need more guidance, check out the course readings and revisit the videos from the earlier course. Let's keep going. Hi there, I'm back for a second quick summary. Now you've carefully planned your UX research study, it's time to conduct the research with participants. As UX designers, we're always keeping the user top of mind. After all, we're trying to create the best experience for our users. That's why usability studies are so important. They're one way to get real feedback from a group of participants. Okay, let's jump right in. A usability study is a research method that assesses how easy it is for participants to complete core tasks in a product. During a usability study, researchers observe the participants to understand how they interact with the prototype of the product and complete tasks. Then, UX designers use the insights from the study to make improvements to their designs. There are 2 types of usability studies, moderated and unmoderated. In moderated usability studies, a person guides participants through the study in real time. The person who guides participants through the study is known as the moderator. The moderator's goal is to assign participants different tasks to complete within the product and watch participants interact with the product. Plus, they collect their feedback along the way. Moderated studies allow the moderator to ask specific questions, follow up in real time, and build a rapport with participants. On the other hand, in unmoderated usability studies, the participants test out the prototypes without a moderator present. Usually, the study is recorded on video, and the UX team reviews the video footage after the study. Since participants complete tasks on their own time and in their own space, it can be easier to get accurate feedback. Plus, they might feel more comfortable being honest when there isn't a moderator in the room. So why conduct usability studies? Because your product looks and functions differently at every stage, you can conduct as many usability studies as you need to make changes to your design and improve the user experience. And you can conduct usability studies at any point in the design process. Keep in mind that the later in the process you conduct a usability study, the more expensive it is to make changes because your design is further along in the design process and more complex. That's why it's important to start testing now, when you have a low fidelity prototype of your website. One more thing, determining the size of your study depends on the project, but around 5 to 8 participants is a good start. It's a large enough sample size to gather real data, but it's not so large that the study costs a lot of money or takes a long time. And that's it for the second step of a UX research study, conducting the research. As a reminder, if you'd like more in-depth introduction to these concepts, check out the course readings to find the original videos on conducting a usability study. You can also watch a usability study in action there. Hi there. You might remember when we discussed biases in UX research in an earlier course. Well, in this video, I want to quickly remind you about some of the biases that may occur when you conduct usability studies. As a refresher, a bias is favoring or having prejudice against someone or something based on limited information. All humans have biases, including you and me. The key is to identify and become aware of these biases so that you can guard against them. For that reason, you need to be aware of common types of bias you or your participants may have during usability studies. We've covered these biases earlier in the certificate program, but let's do a quick refresher about implicit bias, serial position effect, friendliness bias, and social desirability bias. First, implicit bias, or unconscious bias, is the collection of attitudes and stereotypes we assign to people without our conscious knowledge. These attitudes and stereotypes are often negative, exclusionary, or disempowering. When recruiting participants for usability studies, any implicit biases you have against a particular user group might impact your expectations for how those participants will interact with the product. Another bias you may have during usability study is serial position effect. Serial position effect is a psychological bias that states that when given a list of items, people are more likely to remember the first few and the last few, while the items in the middle tend to blur. Be aware that when you're interviewing or watching participants, the first and last things they reveal might stand out to you more than the feedback in the middle because of the serial position effect. Similarly, your participants might experience the serial position effect. If you give participants a list of instructions, they're more likely to remember the first and the last items on the list. Next up, let's chat about another bias, which is often experienced by participants, friendliness bias. Friendliness bias describes the tendency of people to agree with those they like in order to maintain a non-confrontational conversation. As a moderator, if you are too friendly and develop too strong a rapport with participants, there's a chance participants will want to agree with you in order to avoid confrontation. This can stop participants from giving honest feedback. The last bias to guard against is the social desirability bias. The social desirability bias describes the tendency for people to answer questions in a way that will be viewed favorably by others. In usability studies, the social desirability bias can cause participants to focus on the positive aspects of their experience with the product and minimize the negative aspects. One way to guard against this bias is provide participants with a series of statements that came from other users. Ask participants which statement they most relate to and emphasize that there's no correct answer. Each of these biases can have a tremendous impact on the data you collect during a usability study. So how can we reduce bias? Well, the first step you can take to reduce bias when conducting a usability study is identify and admit your own biases. So, besides identifying them, what else can we do to avoid biases? Find participants from a representative sample. The small group of participants you conduct your usability study with should represent your key user group, as well as user groups that are often marginalized. Next, define the research criteria beforehand. When you created a plan for your usability study, a couple of the key elements you focused on were the research goals and the research questions. By establishing research goals before the usability study begins, you'll reduce the chance of designer biases. Fourth, phrase interview questions thoughtfully. Stick to open-ended, non-leading questions like, how did it go? What was your experience like? Or what worked and what didn't work for you and why? Remember, the goal of usability studies is to get honest feedback from the participants. In addition, let participants express themselves fully and in their own words. During the usability study, make sure you understand exactly how participants feel and why. Finally, be mindful of your body language. Remember the friendliness bias? A lot of us are people pleasers. If you nod, smile, or react favorably to something when you are the moderator of a study, it might encourage participants to share feedback that will get them more nods or more smiles. Body language like this can bias the feedback that participants provide. And that's it. In the upcoming video, we'll move on to the next step in a UX research study, which is analyzing and synthesizing your research results. Let's keep going. Welcome back. We're making our way through the steps in a UX research study. So far, we've covered the first two steps: plan the study and conduct the research. After a usability study, we have a ton of feedback from participants. What we're going to do with all that information? Well, in this video, we'll move to step 3 of a UX research study: analyze and synthesize the results. Analyzing and synthesizing the results from your research is all about turning observations into actionable insights. Remember, an insight is an observation that helps you understand the user or their needs from a new perspective. Insights help explain what data means and what to do with it. In just 4 steps, we can turn the observations from our research into actionable insights. First, gather all of the data from the usability study in one place. This includes everything from the observations you quickly scribbled on sticky notes to the notes that you took in Google Docs or spreadsheets. Be sure to check with your team to gather any notes that they may have taken too. Next, organize the data. This is where we take the data gathered in step 1 and arrange it. If you wrote your observations on sticky notes, you might use a method called affinity diagramming to organize your data, which you learned about in an earlier course of this program. Or, if you use spreadsheet note-taking to record your observations, you've already started organizing the data without even realizing it. Each of these methods are reliable, so the choice of how you organize your data is up to you. After you organize your data, you're ready to find themes. One of the key goals of user research is to identify themes or patterns that are common across participants. To do this, we'll ask ourselves 2 key questions. What common patterns stand out in the data you collected? And what do they tell you about your product design? Once you recognize the themes, it's easier to turn the feedback into something actionable. And lastly, come up with insights based on the themes. Strong insights are grounded in real data and answer the research questions that were laid out in your plan. Your insights should be easy to understand and increase your empathy for the user's experience. The best insights inspire direct action and help the design team improve the product. Depending on the amount of data you've collected, you should be able to come up with a handful of themes and insights. Once you have a list of insights from a usability study, you're ready to make improvements to your design. This is what we'll cover in the next video, iterating on your low-fidelity designs. I'll meet you there. Welcome back. Now that you've analyzed feedback from your usability study and came up with insights, it's time to iterate on your low-fidelity prototype. The goal is to improve your designs based on the feedback you've received. In this video, we'll go over how to make changes to your prototype in Adobe XD to incorporate feedback from a usability study. While you were working on your own project, I conducted a moderated usability study on the Wisconsin County Library website. The study participants provided feedback about the website's functionality and shared some challenges they faced when using the product. I gathered all of the data and observations from the usability study, found themes in the data, and came up with a few insights. I'll now use these insights to iterate on my designs. Incorporating feedback to improve your designs is straightforward when you're using Adobe XD. All it takes is making updates to your digital wireframes and creating a new low-fidelity prototype that includes the feedback you received. Why not I show you? When I open Adobe XD, my project is right where I left off. I need to make updates to the wireframes of the Wisconsin County Library website, so I'll make a copy of all of my wireframes and paste them below my original wires. It's also helpful to add a text box to the left of these wireframes and call it Wireframes 2. This will help me keep track of all of my rounds of designs. By now, you should have a list of insights that came out of conducting your usability study. These insights should inform changes that you plan to implement to improve the user experience of your website. There are a handful of insights that came out of the usability study about the library website I've been working on. For this video, I'll focus on two of those insights. Participants want it to be more obvious when they add a book to their basket on the search results page. Participants want to be able to navigate to the home page of the website by clicking on the WCL logo. Let's go through each of these, and I'll make changes to my designs in Adobe XD. First up, the search results page. During the study, all participants did not realize that the book they selected was actually reserved when they clicked on the reserve button on the search results page. To improve this user experience, I need to make it more obvious that the button next to the book changed from reserve to in basket. In other parts of my website, I've made the in basket button black and the text white when this happens, so that there's contrast with other buttons on the page. Let me make that change here. The first thing that I'm going to have to do is ungroup my repeat grids to make this change. There we go, simple as that. Now I can use these same colors throughout the rest of my mockup. Second, participants want to be able to navigate to the home page of the website by clicking the WCL logo, which is in the top left corner of every web page. During the usability study, 3 participants were confused that the website's logo at the top of the screen didn't take them back to the website's homepage. On other websites, users can easily navigate back to the homepage from any part of the website by clicking on the organization's logo. So my website's user experience didn't meet the participants' expectations. The good news is this should be a quick fix. Since this insight is about the connections between artboards, I need to switch from the Design tab to the Prototype tab. On each of my artboards, I'll click the logo in the top left corner and drag the arrow to the homepage artboard. Now, if a user wants to navigate to the home page at any point, all they have to do is click the logo. Okay, I've just incorporated 2 insights that came out of the usability study into my low fidelity designs in Adobe XD. I still have a lot more work to do and many more insights to address in order to improve the user experience on my website. Keep in mind you will probably get a ton of feedback from participants during a usability study, especially when you're testing a low fidelity prototype. That's completely normal and to be expected. You might even need a full rework of your entire design after the usability study. The goal is to keep iterating on your designs with each round of feedback you get, so don't be discouraged. Now, it's your turn to make changes to your wireframes and low fidelity prototypes based on insights from your usability study. Don't be afraid to make big changes. Hi there. Let's do a quick review of everything you've accomplished in this part of the course. You started off strong by creating a low fidelity prototype using Adobe XD. Then you got feedback about that prototype through usability study. To be able to conduct your usability study, you learned how to plan the study, conducted the study, and analyzed and synthesized your study results. Finally, you made changes to your low fidelity prototype in Adobe XD based on your research insights. Coming up, you'll build mockups and a high fidelity prototype of your website in Adobe XD. You'll add color, images, icons, and basic animations to your web pages. Your designs will start to look and feel more like a real website in the next part of the course, so get excited, and I'll meet you there. Welcome back! So far, you've learned how to build wireframes and low fidelity prototypes in Adobe XD. Now you'll build on the Adobe XD skills you've learned and use them to create your own mockups and high fidelity prototypes. First, you'll create mockups for your website in Adobe XD. I'll be designing alongside you and we'll show you plenty of pro tips for creating mockups along the way. Your designs will start to look and feel like a real responsive website. Next, you'll extend your work with design systems. You'll even import an external design system into your own Adobe XD work. Then you'll turn your mockups into a high fidelity prototype. You'll create connections, add interaction details, and adjust the animations. Finally, you'll test your high fidelity prototype through a usability study. The key is to get lots of feedback from a diverse set of users in order to continue improving on your designs. By the end of this part of the course, your second project will be complete. You'll have designed a responsive website. So let's get started. I'll see you soon. Hi there. Hope you're ready to take the next step in creating website designs in Adobe XD, building mockups. In this video, we'll review some of the key differences between wireframes and mockups and discuss the importance of mockups in the design process. So let's start with wireframes. Wireframes are an outline or a sketch of a product or screen. Wireframes are a great tool for helping UX designers figure out the overall structure of a website or app. Remember, you can create wireframes on paper if you want to move quickly and brainstorm lots of ideas, or digitally when you have a better idea of the structure of your product. After you've gone through a few iterations and feel satisfied with your wireframes, it's time to bring the designs to life visually and add more details. And the best way to do that is with a mockup. A mockup is a static, high-fidelity design that's used as a representation of a final product. It includes more visual and UI elements so UX designers and their collaborators can get a better idea about the final state of the website or application. Mockups are not clickable or highly interactive, which means they can be used to make multiple iterations without affecting the functionality. Let's explore the differences between wireframes and mockups in a bit more detail. Here's an example from an earlier course when my colleagues were working on the homepage of the Dog Walker app in Figma. On the left, the wireframes are static images that give us an overview of the page layout and hierarchy. You'll notice that the designs outline the content without providing a lot of detail or color. On the right, the mockup of the homepage includes color, typography, and iconography. These elements make it easier to map out the user flow and can help UX designers visualize the user journey in a more dynamic way. Keep in mind, this wireframe and mockup are for an app, but we'll go through the same process in this course for our website design. Going from a wireframe to a mockup should not feel like a paint-by-number exercise. For example, it's okay to place an image in a different part of your mockup design than you planned for in your wireframe. The way you arrange elements on a screen can make your design aesthetically pleasing, help users interact with your product, and make your designs more accessible. Similar to wires, you'll iterate on your mockups multiple times and solicit feedback in between rounds. Coming up, I'll show you how to create a mockup in Adobe XD, so get excited. Hey there, it's time to start using what you've learned to create your own mockup in Adobe XD. I'll go through steps to create a mockup for my library website homepage based on the wireframes I created early in the course. Here we go. First, I'll open Adobe XD and select the artboard that has the wireframe of the library website homepage on it. It's always a good idea to have the wireframes in front of you as you create mockups. Because my wireframes are all neatly lined up, I'm going to create a new artboard below the wireframe that I'll be using for reference, which is the homepage in this case. So I'll pop over to the toolbar and we'll pick the artboard tool and add a Web 1920 artboard directly below the homepage wireframe. This makes it a little easier to refer to the wireframe when I'm making the mock. Now I'll move this second artboard below the first one so it's easy for me to track the flow of my work. I personally prefer to work from the top of the page down, but you can design your pages in any order you like. So let's start with the navigation bar. I'll draw a rectangle for the background. I'll set the background color of the navigation bar to black by clicking the fill option under Appearance in the Property Inspector. Next, I'll add the logo to the far left side of the navigation bar. Here's a quick pro tip. Adobe XD lets you add images really easily by creating a rectangle first and then dropping the image inside of it. For my mockup, I don't need to drop in an image though, as my logo is just simple text. I'm going to create a text box and type in WCL, which stands for Wisconsin County Library. Next, I'll change the font to Belly Display and make the size 48. Finally, I'll adjust the color to a mustard yellow using hex code E0D15C. Using hex codes instead of randomly picking a color allows me to make sure that I'm using the same color throughout my mockup. Okay, so I have the logo in the navigation bar. Let me keep building this part of the page out. I need to add more text into the nav bar for the links to other pages. Similar to my wireframes, I'll add text boxes for Search, Discover, Donate, and About to the left side of the nav bar next to the logo. Then I'll add text boxes for Account and Basket to the right side of the nav bar. Now I need to change the look and feel of all this text in the navigation bar. I'll click the text boxes while holding the Shift key until all 6 text boxes are selected. The good news is that the background color for these text boxes is already transparent, so I don't need to change that. But I do need to change a few other things using the Property Inspector here. I'll change the font to Avenir and I'll make the size 20. I also want this to be heavy to add a bit of emphasis. Finally, I'll change the color of this text to white so that it stands out against my black navigation bar. Next, I need to make sure that the text boxes are aligned and evenly spaced using the alignment tools in the Property Inspector. First, I'll select the text boxes by dragging a selection over them or using Shift and click. Then I'll align them all to horizontal center by clicking this button. I'll also put even spacing between all of these text boxes by clicking the horizontal distribute button. I'm going to be using the same font, color, and size throughout my mockup, so I want to save these preferences in the Assets panel, which is a collection of the elements and preferences you've created in your design. The Assets panel serves as your sticker sheet. This makes it really easy to share your elements and components with fellow designers. I recommend saving your preferences when you finish each stage of your design, or when you create new elements. This will make the design process faster and more consistent as you move forward. To open the Assets panel, I'll go to the bottom of the toolbar on the left side of the screen and click on this Libraries icon. A panel opens that allows me to either search libraries of assets I've imported or look at the assets for the design that I'm working on, which is called Document Assets. Right now, it's blank because I'm just starting my mockup. I'll start by saving some of the colors I use in the navigation bar. First, let me focus on the logo. Adobe XD makes it really easy. I'll select the text box of the logo and press the plus sign next to the word Colors in the Assets panel. And ta-da! Just like that, the mustard yellow color from my logo has been added to my preferences. Cool, right? I want to follow this same process to add the other colors I've used in my navigation bar too, like the black and white. There we go, simple as that. Now I can use these same colors throughout the rest of my mockup. Next, I want to save the character styles. which will allow me to easily use the same font, size, and color for additional text. This is great for creating consistent headings throughout your mockup. For example, I'll select the logo text. I'll click the plus icon in the character styles header, and that's it. I'll do the same thing for the links to the other pages of the library website. I don't need to save each one of these as they're all the same style. I only need to click one of them, like search, and click the plus sign again. Great. Now I have some preferences saved in my assets panel that I continue to use throughout my design. You may notice that there's one other part of the document assets panel, which is components. As a reminder, components are made up of elements. Common components are buttons, which include elements like text, color, and a shape. In this case, my component will be the navigation bar I just created. To create a component, I need to group items together. I'll select the navigation bar background plus all the text and the logo, and then hit Command and G on a Mac or Control and G on a PC. You can also right-click and pick Group if that's easier for you. That's it. Now these elements in my navigation bar are grouped together and form a component. I'll add this component to the Assets panel by clicking the plus sign next to the word Components. This will allow me to quickly reuse this exact same navigation bar on future artboards. In other words, I can easily include the same nav bar at the top of other pages of the website. All I have to do is click on this component and drag it onto the new artboard like this. One cool thing I want to show you, if I edit a master component, all instances of that component will change instantly across my mockup. For example, if I add a new link to the navigation bar, the nav bar on all pages will automatically be updated, which saves a ton of time. I'll right-click on the Assets panel and click on Edit Main Component. Now, the main version of the navigation bar component is selected. Let's say I make a change. Notice how this change is updated for all the navigation bars across artboards? Pretty sweet. Anyway, I'll undo this change for now, but I wanted to show you this cool tip. Woohoo! The navigation bar is ready to go. Now I'll move on to the next layer of the homepage below the navigation bar, which includes a hero image of the featured author and accompanying text. First, I'll draw a rectangle. Then I'll open Finder on a Mac or Windows Explorer on a PC and find the image I want. And now, if I drag this onto the rectangle, the image will fill the rectangle. Bam! How neat is that? Okay, now I've included a hero image in my mockup, it's time to add some text to describe this image. I'll draw another rectangle to the right of the image where the text will go. I'll fill the rectangle with this dark purple color, which is hex code 382862. I'll also add the dark purple color to the Assets panel because I'm probably going to need to use it again. I'll go to Color on the Assets panel and click on the plus icon. Now let me show you another awesome feature in Adobe XD, stacks. Stacks allow you to move or resize an element from a stack, and the rest of the elements will automatically move to preserve the defined spacing between elements. So let's check this out in action. I'll create 3 text boxes and stack them on top of one another. I'll type featured author into the top text box, a short headline into the middle, and some body text using lorem ipsum in the bottom text box. I'll select the 3 text boxes and group them together by pressing Ctrl or Command plus G. Then I'll name the group Featured Author in the Layers panel. Now I'll go to the Layout section in the middle of the Property Inspector. I need to check to make sure that Responsive Resize is on. I'll click the checkbox next to Stack and make sure the vertical stack button is selected. That's the icon with the arrow that points downwards. To the right of these icons is a number or a line, which represents the spacing between all the text boxes in the stack. If you see a number, that's because you have consistent spacing between all the items. If you see a line, it's because there are different spacing between the different text boxes. I want this to be consistent, so I'm going to set it to 24. If I want the spacing to be larger, I could type 34, for example, and the spacing automatically changes. This will help me save time as I design. But for now, I'll leave the spacing as 24. Alright, I've just finished designing everything above the fold on the library website homepage. Let's take a brief pause so you can open XD and start playing around with your own mockups. When you're ready, meet me in the next video, where I'll continue to design the rest of my mockup of the library website homepage. More pro tips to come. Welcome back. I'm going to keep building the mockup of the library website homepage that I started in the last video. Now that the navigation bar and hero image section are set up, I can work on the sections of the homepage that are below the fold. So let's get to it. Since I'm working down the page from top to bottom, I'll focus on the layer below the hero image, which is the popular Adobe CL layer. This layer contains 2 books, each with some supporting text to describe the book. I'll start by creating the elements for one book and its accompanying text. First, I'll create a rectangle and fill it with the same mustard yellow I saved earlier in the Assets panel. To keep this rectangle in place while I add other elements on top of it, I can right-click on the rectangle and select Lock. Now, even if I click on the rectangle and try to drag it, it won't move. First, I'll create a rectangle to represent the book cover. Up next, I'll add 3 text boxes for the book title, author, and book details. I'll add some placeholder text that says book title and author for the first 2 text boxes. For the third text box, the description, I need quite a bit of text, so I'll use lorem ipsum. Let me quickly copy and paste some lorem ipsum text from this website that I found through a quick Google search. Now I'll format the text size and apply color. I'll select all 3 boxes and change the fill color to black using the black color I saved earlier in my Assets panel. Next, I'll adjust the font size for each text using the Property Inspector. I'll choose font size 48 for the book title, 20 for the author, and 16 for the description. Remember what you learned about typographic hierarchy earlier in the certificate program with my colleague Kunal? Typographic hierarchy orders typefaces and fonts in a layout to create divisions that show users where to focus and how to find information. Most product interfaces have different sizes for text. A larger sized text that's used for titles, in this case the book's title, and a smaller sized text that's used for longer text passages, like the book's description. I've made the font size for the author's name in between these 2. Awesome! The first book is ready to go. I want to repeat this exact set of elements on the right side of the popular WCL layer. Luckily, Adobe XD has a really helpful feature called Repeat Grid that allows me to do this easily. Let me show you. To use the Repeat Grid feature, I first need to select all the elements I want to repeat. The easiest way to do this is to go into the Layers panel. To open the Layers panel, I go to the toolbar on the left and click on the Layers icon toward the bottom. Inside the Layers panel, there's a list of all the elements that I've created so far, as well as the groups of elements that I've made, like the navigation bar. Let me locate the rectangle and the 3 text boxes I just created for the book. Okay, here they are. Because text fields like the book title or the author name can get quite long, I want to make sure that those flow on the page properly. So to do that, I'm going to use stacks like we used in a previous lesson. So the first thing that I'm going to do is group the 3 text boxes together and turn them into a stack. I can do that by selecting the 3 text boxes and clicking the Stack button in the Properties panel. Now I'm going to select the top element, press the Shift key and select the last element. Notice that everything in between is selected as well. Now that I have selected all the elements I want to repeat, I can go over to the Property Inspector on the right here and click on Repeat Grid. If I grab the green transform handle on the box and drag it to the right, the group of elements is duplicated. And you can use the feature vertically too. Adobe XD features like Repeat Grid save us designers a lot of time when making mockups. I'll use this feature in the next layer of the homepage too when I build out the feature collections. You may have noticed that the duplicated elements look identical to the original ones. One thing I really like about a Repeat Grid is that you can edit individual items inside of the Repeat Grid and it won't change the other elements. Let's take a peek. I'll pick one of the duplicated elements in the Repeat Grid by double-clicking on it. Let me edit this book name. There we go. While I'm at it, I've also already changed the font style to belly display. Now I'll drag in some images, like I did for the hero image. Here's an important tip. Repeat grids allow you to input multiple images at once. Knowing this, I set up the images in my file so that they were labeled 1 and 2. This labeling lets Adobe XD know the order that the images should go in. I'll select both of these images and drag and drop them onto one of the 2 image placeholder rectangles in my Repeat Grid. And just like that, they're both populated. This is such a great time saver and another benefit of designing in Adobe XD. Alright, that layer is coming together. I'm happy with that. Now it's time to work on the next section, Featured Collections. I'm definitely going to want to use the Repeat Grid feature here. Knowing this, I'll create some placeholder items for the first section that I can repeat. I'll use the Text tool to draw a long text box for the collection title. I'll name it Collection Title for now, and I'll make its font belly display size 48. Below the collection title, I'll add a vertical rectangle to represent a book. Finally, I want to add the book name and author name below the book, so I'll create two text boxes stacked one above the other. I'll call the top one book name and the bottom one author name. I'll make these text boxes Avenir font size 14 with the book name in bold. Okay, now that I have all the elements I need, it's time for the fun stuff, Repeat Grid. I'll do this by opening the Layers panel and selecting all the elements I want in the Repeat Grid. Then I'll move my mouse over to the Property Inspector on the right and click on Repeat Grid. Great, my Repeat Grid is ready. Now I'll grab the green transform handle on the box, just like I did last time, and drag it to the right until I have two more instances of this group of elements. Awesome. Now I want each book to be spaced a little bit closer to each other. To do this, I'm going to move my mouse to the white space between the first two books. Notice how the area turns pink as soon as my mouse is on top of it? This lets me know that I can edit the spacing. If I click on the side of the pink rectangle and drag it to the left, the amount of space between the first and second book decreases. At the same time, the Repeat Grid function automatically resizes the amount of space between the second and third books to match. That's pretty neat, right? Now I have my collections of books in this layer, but they're still really basic. I need to add some images and add in the book and author names. As I did earlier, I'm going to go to my image folder on my desktop and quickly grab 3 images I want to display here. I'll drag them into one of the empty rectangles. Bam! They're all in. I just love how easy this feature is. Not only is it easy to add images to Repeat Grids, it's also easy to add text from a file. Prepare to have your mind blown. I've pre-populated a text file with all of the book names I need to add to my mockup. The first book name is at the top of the list, and the last book name is at the bottom. Notice how each book is on its own line. This is really important, as each new line tells Adobe XD it's a new name. To get these names into Adobe XD, I'm going to drag the text file from the folder it's in and place it on top of one of the text boxes titled Book Name. And just like that, all of my books are populated on the screen. I'll now quickly repeat this process for the author names. How cool is that? Alright, another layer done. My mockup is really starting to take shape now. There's just one more left, the footer. I want the footer to match the top navigation bar, so I'm going to start by drawing one large rectangle and filling it with the color black. The first element I want to add to my footer is the larger library logo. To do this, I'm going to copy the logo from my top navigation bar and paste it down here. To the right of the logo, I'll add another text box where I'll type Wisconsin County Library. I'll put each word on its own line. I'll also quickly adjust the font type to Avenir Book and the size to 20. So now I have the text of my logo, but the actual 3 letters that I use for it are a little bit small compared to the text next to it. So I'm just going to make that logo text a little bit larger so it looks a bit better. At the moment, the 2 text boxes that make up my logo are separate. Whenever I want to use the larger logo, I'll want these elements to be grouped together. I'll do this by selecting the 2 text boxes and pressing Ctrl or Command plus G on my keyboard. Now my items are grouped together. To the right of the logo, I want to insert 6 library addresses in 2 rows. I'll mock this up quickly using the Repeat Grid feature. First, I'll add 2 text boxes and name them County and Address. Then I'll form a Repeat Grid. Now I need to use both green transformer handles to turn this one group into 6 groups. Finally, I'll import a text file for the counties. I'm choosing not to do this for the addresses, as the automated feature does not work if the text I want to import is on multiple lines. This is great. I'm almost done. The last thing I need to add in the footer are icons for social media sites. I downloaded these in advance from each social media site and have them saved to my computer. One final step, Let me make these icons mustard yellow to better match the rest of the page. All right, my mock-up for the Wisconsin County Library website homepage is done. I still have additional artboards to create as I want to mock up the entire book reservation flow, so I'm just getting started. I hope you learned some great practical tips that you can apply to your own mocks as you work in Adobe XD. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Hello again. In the last video, I built a mock-up for the desktop version of the homepage of the Wisconsin County Library website. While you were working on mock-ups for your project, I did too. In addition to the homepage, I created additional artboards to mock up the entire book reservation flow. Check these out. Once I finished all the mock-ups for the desktop version of the website, I also designed the homepage mock for a smaller screen size, a mobile phone. I put it here below the desktop designs. You'll notice that the mock I created for the homepage follows a layout I decided on during the wireframe phase. I start out with my top navigation bar, including a hamburger menu and two icons for search and the checkout cart. I also included the WCL logo in the middle of the navigation bar. Then I have the hero image and accompanying text, followed by the popular WCL section, the featured collections section, and finally the footer. As you get started on your own project and design versions of your website for mobile phones, I want to show you one trick: how to design a flyout menu. A flyout menu provides an overview of a website's hierarchy and helps users find information to navigate the site. A flyout menu gets its name because it flies out from the side of the screen when you hover your mouse over or click on an element. In the library website I'm designing, the flyout menu will appear when a user taps on the hamburger menu icon. To create a flyout menu in Adobe XD, I'll start by creating a new artboard that will hold my flyout menu. Because my flyout menu will either be the same size or smaller than my current screen, I'll add another phone-size artboard next to it. Next, I'll draw a rectangle for the background of the flyout menu. I'll fill this black from the Assets panel and remove the stroke. Then I want to add in a close button for the flyout. I'll draw this in the top left so that it appears over the top of the hamburger button. I'm going to make the close button out of two rectangles that I group together and rotate. To make the menu useful, I'm going to add links into the different areas of our website. In this case, Discover, Donate, About, and Account. I'll create these using a repeat grid and apply the heading style from the Assets panel. Now all that's needed to complete the layout of my flyout menu is the library logo at the bottom. I'll copy this from the footer for now. And we're done. Later on, we'll wire this up so that it appears when you preview your prototype. You can use the same process to create a search bar pop-up as well. This way, when users click on the search bar icon in the navigation bar of the library website, a search bar will pop up that covers the width of the screen. Great! I have my ideas for the homepage of the mobile website fleshed out. Now, just like I did with the desktop version of my website, I need to create additional artboards to mock up the entire book reservation flow. I'll get to work on that while you get to work on your own designs. Have fun. Hey there! You just learned how to create your own mockups in Adobe XD. How exciting! Now let's explore some ways to use the elements and components you created in your mockups to build a design system that you can use across your website designs. As a refresher, a design system is a series of reusable elements and guidelines that allow teams to design and develop a product following predetermined standards. Some of the visual elements frequently included in a design system are components, color, iconography, layout, copy, animation, elevation, typography, and illustration. So how are design systems set up? Most design systems include visual styles, guidelines for how to apply them, UI components, and supporting code for developers. Let's go through each of these in more detail. First up, visual styles. Defining the styles for core visual design elements like typography, color palettes, and iconography helps companies express their brand more consistently. This also helps UX designers improve the user's experience. For example, here at Google, we often use the colors blue, red, yellow, and green in our websites and apps. So the hex codes for these colors are included in Google's design system, which helps ensure we're using the same shade of these four colors across all of our branding. Next are the guidelines. This is where the design principles, editorial guidelines, and implementation guidelines are defined. Clear rules about how certain components or styles should be used within a product help designers stay consistent across all of their work. After that, there's UI components, which are interface elements and features that are consistent across a brand or product. As you've learned, components can include buttons, dialogues, gestures, and more. And finally, design systems support code for developers. To help developers build out designs correctly, design systems often include the code to create each of the provided elements or components. Compiling all of this information into a comprehensive design system ensures that all the different elements in your designs will carry through to the final product. All right, so that's an overview of everything that goes into a design system. And you might be wondering, why should I use a design system in my own project? Well, let's quickly cover some of the benefits of working with design systems. Design systems create consistency for both designers and users, and reinforce a brand's identity. In addition, design systems help us create scalable designs. Using a design system also saves time and money by increasing efficiency. Of course, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. One challenge that comes with using design systems is that there can be so many components and elements included. Sometimes UX designers can get lost in the details. Depending on the company you end up working for, you could either be learning a complex design system like Google's or helping to build one from the ground up. Either way, you'll adapt or apply elements of a design system to all of your designs. I think you'll be pretty impressed with how much using a design system can improve your work. All right, now that you know about design systems, it's time to go back into Adobe XD and use one. In the next video, I'll cover how to work with assets to an external design system and how to publish assets to create your own unique design system. I'll meet you there. Welcome back. We're exploring all things design systems when it comes to your mockups in Adobe XD. In this video, we'll discuss some of the ways you can get the most out of working with external design systems. So let's get going in XD. I'll import an external design system and figure out how to work with it. I'll start with Material Design, which is Google's design system. I'll go to File at the top of the menu bar, scroll down to Get UI Kits, and then click on Material Design. It automatically takes me to the Material Design Resources page. I'll click Design Kits for Adobe XD in the top right corner of the page. That opens a folder on my desktop where I can save the file. Next, I'll open the zip file. Then, I can choose between two different material design themes, light and dark. Let's check out the light theme. Whoa, visual elements like color palettes and fonts are all there in the Assets panel. Even better, they've included a bunch of artboards with directions on how to use the design kit, as well as icons, themes, and components that you can copy into your designs. Here's a pro tip. You can customize any element or component you borrow from a design kit to match your designs. It's often as simple as changing a few colors or rounding some corners. Feel free to check these out on your own as you get started. The material design system here in Adobe XD might seem pretty familiar. That's because it's pretty much the same as the one you already worked with in Figma. If I want to add more UI kits, it's super easy. I'll go to File at the top of the menu bar, scroll down to Get UI Kits again, and then click on More UI Kits. It automatically takes me to a download page with lots of other kits. There's Apple, AEM Components, Microsoft, and many other companies' UI kits. If you want to explore even more options, you can also search for design systems on the web and then download them from the company website, as long as they're compatible with Adobe XD. And with that, you know how to import design kits into Adobe XD. You may have noticed that there are many to choose from. Take some time to explore these kits and understand what each one has to offer. Have fun. Hello! It's time to learn how to create prototypes of our responsive website designs in Adobe XD. In particular, I'll focus on how to go from mockups to high-fidelity prototypes for the desktop version of the library website. In an earlier course, you learned that you could create a high-fidelity prototype following 5 steps. Lay out the mockups, connect the screens, add interaction details, adjust the animation, then complete for all the screens. When you went through this process in the last course, you were working in Figma, but now we're creating our designs in Adobe XD. So let's explore how to complete these steps and create a hi-fi prototype in this new tool. I'll start by clicking on Adobe XD and opening my mockup designs. Remember, to create a prototype, switch into prototype mode by clicking Prototype in the menu in the upper left corner. First, I'll lay out my mockups in the order of the main user flow. In other words, I want my mockups to be in the order that users would move through the library website. This will make it easier to build the connections. Here we go. This should be right. Now that the artboards are in order, I can move on to step 2, connect the screens. At this point, I'll be thinking through the order of interaction for the user visiting the library website. The user journey I'm focused on is finding and reserving a book. Starting on the home page, the first action I want a user to take is to click the search link in the top navigation bar. So I'll click on the first element I want to connect, which is a text that says search. A blue arrow will appear. I'll click and drag this arrow to the second artboard that I laid out earlier, which has a big search bar across the top of the page. You'll notice that the artboard I drag the arrow to will be highlighted in blue until I release the arrow. This helps me double check that I'm connecting the things that I want to connect. The next action I want a user to take on my website is to search for a book in the search bar. I'll need to connect the search button here to the search results artboard. You've already made connections between artboards when you made your low fidelity prototype earlier in the course, and I've shown you how to do a couple of them again here. So I'm going to quickly speed through connections to the rest of my user flow for the library website. One sec, I'll be right back. There we go. All of my connections are in place. It's time to move to step 3, which is add interaction details. In Adobe XD, you can decide the type of interaction you want for the transition between two elements, and we call these triggers. Triggers define what type of interaction will cause a prototype to advance forward. The first option is tap, which is the most common choice. This means a transition will happen when the user taps or clicks on the first element. Then there's drag. This means a transition will happen when the user drags or swipes across the screen in a set direction. Drag is often used for image carousels. The last two options, gamepad and voice, allow you to prototype more complex products. For this library website, I'll stick with the tap trigger because it's the closest to a simple click, and I'm designing for a desktop computer where clicking is common. And with that, I'm ready to move on to step 4, which is adjust the animation. For desktop websites, I don't need to add too many animations. Think of websites you visited recently from your desktop or laptop computer. Most of these pages have a simple transition to the next page on your click, so I can skip this for my desktop website designs. This means my high-fidelity prototype for the desktop version of my designs is complete. That was quick, but it's a bit more complicated to add interaction details and adjust these animations for the mobile version of your website designs. Let me show you how this would work for the mobile site. Here it is. First, I'm going to add a connection between the hamburger menu item on the homepage and the flyout menu artboard. And just so you don't get confused, Adobe XD uses dotted lines for connecting overlays. The solid lines are for the main connections. Now, let me add the interaction. I'm going to keep the trigger as tap because that's the most common interaction for mobile websites. For the actions, I want the type to be overlay, and I've set the animation to slide to the right. This tool sizes the image for me so it's easy to position it over the page. I've set this up in the Overlay submenu. Now let's test out the interaction. I'll click the Preview button and click on the hamburger menu on the top of the page. So this overlay only covers part of the page. I can click the large X to exit. Keep in mind, this overlay example is just one of many ways that you can change the interaction to achieve a responsive design. Now that one of my animations is looking good, I'm ready to repeat this process and complete it for all of the screens in the mobile version of the library website. I'll make connections, add interaction details, and adjust the animations for the rest of the artboards. And there we go. The prototype for the mobile version of the library website should be fully functioning. Let me show you how it works using the preview button. So here I have the preview of my narrow website. I can click on the search field, I can enter a book name, I can click search, and I get the search results page. From here, I can see the detail of a book, such as this Island of Dr. Moreau book, by clicking here. If I click the reserve button, it will tell me that the book is in my basket by changing the reserve button to yellow. At this point, I can see the items that I have in my basket by clicking this basket icon. If I scroll down in my basket, I can see all the books I've added to my basket and then confirm the reservations at the bottom. Clicking here will take me to the reservations confirm page, where I can see when to pick up my books and a quick summary of what I've ordered from the library. At this point, it's very easy for me to get back home by clicking on the WCL logo at the top. That's a wrap. You now know how to create a high-fidelity prototype in Adobe XD. Now it's your turn to bring your own website designs to life. Get creative and don't be afraid to explore.
Welcome back. So far, you've learned some great strategies for adapting the UI and other visual elements to create responsive, high-fidelity web pages. Before you test your designs, you need to make sure that the website is accessible. In this video, we'll discuss some of the ways that UX designers can design web pages with accessibility in mind. The great news is that there are standards you can refer to called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. The WCAG documents explain how to make web content more accessible to people with disabilities. Most of the standards are focused on how to incorporate text, sounds, and images in a way that supports more users. So let's explore 3 ways to make your web designs more accessible, based on WCAG standards. The first way is to make annotations. Annotations are markers placed next to interactive UI elements, like the call to action buttons on the page. Here's a screen of the Dog Walker app that was designed earlier in the certificate program. The screen now has annotations. The numbers in the green circles indicate to an engineer the linear focus order or traversal order that assistive technology, like a screen reader, moves through the form. Traversal order is the navigation flow for a user on an app or a website. The annotations also set the order in which a user would tab through the items on a website if they use a keyboard instead of a touchscreen or a mouse. A second way to make your web designs more accessible is with hierarchical headings. Earlier in the program, you learned about hierarchy, a visual design principle that orders elements on a page and highlights them by their importance. Headings are a great example of how hierarchy can help users navigate a web page by selecting from the screen reader menu options more easily. Headings are an effective way to scale the size of the text based on its importance on the page. Having specific heading tags allows screen readers to understand the hierarchy of the page. Different sized headings can be annotated with H1, H2, H3, and so on to further indicate the hierarchy. These annotations will support the engineer's implementation of headings in HTML. The third way to make your web designs more accessible is by using labels. Labels add descriptive language to the interactive UI elements on the web page. You should use labels to indicate the purpose of the control and any type or role of the control. For example, a floating action button in Gmail is labeled Compose, and the type of the control is a button. When annotating labels for interactive elements on your web page, you should note where similar controls should be grouped to provide more efficiency and context to the screen reader. For example, consider grouping a list of checkboxes so that a user of assistive technology could understand the relationship of the checkboxes and how to quickly navigate to and from them. It's important to include detailed annotations for the engineers who will be working on the implementation of the project once your designs are finalized. In this image, you'll notice that I included annotations for the engineers to provide the labels that the screen reader should read aloud for each button. Successfully applying labels is necessary to create inclusive web pages. That's all for now. Making the most of annotations, hierarchical headings, and labels in your designs can help make your web content more accessible for people with disabilities. Try applying these learnings to your own designs.
Wow, congratulations! You've come such a long way with your designs. Just think about all that you've learned in this part of the course alone. You created mockups for your website in Adobe XD. I showed you a few tips and tricks for creating mockups as I created designs for the Wisconsin County Library website. Your designs start to look and feel like a real responsive website. Next, you extended your work with design systems. You even imported an external design system into your own Adobe XD work. Then, you turned your mockups into a high-fidelity prototype. You created connections, added interaction details, and adjusted the animations. At this point, your second project should be complete. You did it! You designed a responsive website. How does it feel? I am so incredibly proud of you. In the final part of this course, you'll learn how to add this project to your portfolio. It's time to show off your work to employers, potential clients, and other designers. In addition, you'll get started with your job search. You're well on your way to becoming a UX designer. Keep up the great work. Welcome back. Your high-fidelity prototype in Adobe XD is now ready for testing. I bet you're eagerly anticipating feedback from real users. At this point in the design process, I'm going to conduct another usability study to get feedback on my library website designs. Since the usability study will be focused on my high-fidelity designs, I want to get feedback about micro-actions, such as button states or menu animations. I might also want participants to provide feedback about the responsiveness of my designs. You should test your own website designs too. After all, testing and iterating are hugely important parts of the UX design process. The only way you can continue to improve your designs is to get lots of feedback. So let's align on the steps and the goals of planning a usability study. Of course, you conducted a usability study on your low-fidelity prototype earlier in the course, but there are two important reasons that we test high-fidelity prototypes with usability studies too. For one, we need to understand how users will interact with the final product. Having real people move through your website designs will help you understand the user journey much more deeply and identify potential pain points with the experience you've created. In addition, a usability study helps to identify areas to iterate on in the prototype and improve your designs. You'll get lots of feedback from study participants, which you'll synthesize and turn into insights to inform your designs. I personally like to do a few rounds of tests with my high-fidelity prototypes. First, get feedback from team members. This can be done using the Share feature in Adobe XD. Learning from your classmates, co-workers, and managers is especially important when you're new to the field of UX design. For this certificate program, you could even get feedback about your prototypes from your friends and family. These folks can provide lots of helpful tips and point out big red flags early on. Second, reflect on the feedback and decide on design iterations. Don't feel like you have to take into account every single piece of feedback that you receive. Remember, when reviewing feedback and data, you're looking for themes or patterns and coming up with insights. Third, make changes to your designs. These might be small tweaks to a color in your mockup or an entire rework of a whole page. Both are completely okay. And fourth, test the high-fidelity prototype in a usability study. This is the point at which you'll get lots of feedback from participants who will be similar to your website's real users. We shared a lot more information about conducting a moderated or unmoderated usability study earlier in the certificate program. If you need a refresher, all of the course content will be linked in the reading following this video. Otherwise, it's your turn to conduct a usability study focused on the high-fidelity prototype of your website. You've put in so much hard work to get to this point. Good luck. So far in this course, you've been working hard to build mockups and high-fidelity prototypes in Adobe XD. Now we'll discuss how to prepare your design specifications for engineers. Then we'll pivot just a bit and return to your big picture goal, getting a job as a UX designer. You'll add a case study to your portfolio so that you can let your responsive website design project shine. Then we'll cover tips and tricks for scanning job postings. You'll be all set to browse UX design openings in the real world. finally, you'll create a compelling resume that highlights your new UX skills. Let's dive right in. Hey there! You just finished your high-fidelity prototype of a responsive website. Congratulations! Now comes the part where you share your designs with others, one of the most important parts of your work. In the real world, that would mean handing off your designs to developers and engineers. Basically, you provide the mock-ups, prototypes, and specs, and the engineering team starts the coding process. Creating a functional, usable product depends on lots of moving pieces, roles, and talented individuals. Similar to the way UX researchers help UX designers learn what it takes to design a user-centered product, developers make the designs and features that UX designers have created functional. When it comes to websites, front-end and back-end developers are crucial in building the UX team's vision. They work together to produce an end product that's both functional and visually captivating. The role of front-end developers, commonly referred to as web developers, is to write code for all the user-facing interface based on UX designer specifications. Essentially, they help to create the functionality that users will be interacting with on an app or website. Meanwhile, back-end developers write code for the website's architecture and data storage or retrieval based on the UX sitemap and functionality. Users don't often see the work back-end developers do, but they play an essential role in making it all possible. For example, a fast-loading website is often the result of good back-end engineering. As a designer, you'll likely work with both front and back-end developers. These developers will be working with your final designs, but how do you determine when your designs are final? Here are a few things to ask yourself. Are the designs a true representation of the intended user experience? Have placeholder text, icons, and imagery been replaced with finalized assets? And are participants or users able to interact with and interpret the designs of that external guidance? If your team can answer these questions with a resounding yes, then you've done it. You've finalized your designs, and it's time to hand off the designs to engineering for production. When you land a design role at a company, you'll work with front-end and back-end developers to fully realize ideas. Working collaboratively will be essential to your success. You'll be faced with various challenges depending on the methodology that's guiding the team, and there's no singular right way of doing things. It's all about what works best for the team, so communication is key. Next, we're going to explore the how-tos in handing off design specifications in Adobe XD. I'll meet you there. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how UX designers can effectively hand off design specifications, or specs for short, in Adobe XD to developers. Adobe XD provides designers with a way to improve communication between themselves and developers by offering design spec sharing within the software. Before you send design specs to developers, you want to ensure your mock-up or high-fidelity prototype is relatively complete. This means images, colors, sizes, and positions should display a cohesive flow between one artboard or screen to the next. Here are the library website designs I've been working on throughout this course. I created different artboards for the different sizes the website is likely to be, from a desktop computer to a mobile phone. I have all of the different wireframes I created for the home page, search bar, search page, cart page, and more. Beneath the wireframes are the mock-ups, complete with images, descriptions, and other visual elements that make the website seem more realistic. As we draw closer to the finish line, it's vital that designers provide a prototype that's as close to the final product as possible. Now I'm ready to share this prototype with the developers I'm working with. I want to send my teammates a link where they can access the Adobe XD file I've been working on and its design specs. If your document is not already published to the cloud, you'll need to do that now. I can do this quickly by going to the Assets panel and clicking the Upload icon in the top right corner. A window opens and there's a big blue button you can click to publish the file. Easy peasy. Navigate to the upper left corner and click the Share tab to open a panel on the right side of the screen. It reads Link Settings. In the first box, you can type in a name that clearly indicates to developers what you are sending. It's helpful to include the project name and version. I'll name it WCL version final. Under View Settings, you can choose the type of file you'd like to share with viewers. Design Review shares a document that allows you to receive feedback on your design or prototype. Development allows you to share it specifically with developers. Presentation optimizes your design in a presentation format. while user testing is an excellent format to test the design for flow. There's also a custom setting where you can modify the experience to your preference. In this case, since I want to share this with the team that's in charge of creating the front and back-end coding, I'll select Development. Choosing this option will populate additional settings. Now I'll choose between 3 supported platforms: web, iOS, and Android. I can also customize the level of security on the document. Under Link Access, I can allow anyone with a link to access the document by selecting Anyone with the link. Or perhaps I only want those who are invited to view the prototype, in which case I'll select the Only Invited People option. If it's highly sensitive material, I may opt for Anyone with password access. In this case, I'd like any developer I share the link with to be able to access the prototype. I can click Create Link and that will populate a shareable URL. If you make any changes to those settings, make sure you click the Update Link button so it stays up to date for all project stakeholders involved. And that's how you create a shareable prototype to send to developers. Have at it. Hello again. If you've been completing the courses in the certificate program in order, you've already learned about the value of portfolios for UX designers. Portfolios are the primary way for designers to present their work to recruiters, hiring managers, and everyone else. And the major components of your portfolio are the case studies. Let's review why case studies are so important. A case study is a summarized presentation of a design project that typically includes the project goal and objectives, your role in the project, the process your team followed, and the outcome of the project. You might be wondering, why are case studies so important? Case studies are a visible demonstration of your design knowledge, your willingness to collaborate with the team, and your ability to see an idea through from start to finish despite challenges. When a recruiter or hiring manager is considering you for a job, they'll want to find case studies within your portfolio. Each design project you complete will have its own case study. Case studies should be presented in a concise and engaging way. Your case study needs to tell recruiters exactly what they need to know as quickly and efficiently as possible. Your case studies need to be visually appealing and easy to skim. There are some critical pieces that your case study should include, such as your role in the project, the goal of the project, your target user, research conducted and the research findings, your sketches and wireframes, your finished polished designs, key challenges or constraints that you faced, and most importantly, what you learned during the design process. If you want to check out an entry-level designer's portfolio, I recommend revisiting an earlier course where my colleague Kunal walked through a case study from Josh's portfolio. It's linked in the course readings. When you're ready, you can begin building your case study for the responsive website designs you just finished. It's time to add a second project to your portfolio. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Shabby. It's been a while since I last joined you, but I'm back now to share some information about applying for jobs in UX design. As an entry-level designer myself, I hope I can share some perspectives that will set you up for success in your job search. Do you remember at the beginning of this program when you learned about the different roles that UX designers can play? As a reminder, a generalist is a UX designer with a broad number of responsibilities. Most UX designers begin their careers this way, doing various tasks. Or, if you become really interested in one part of UX design, you might find your niche as a specialist. A specialist dives deep into one particular UX design role, like interaction, visual, or motion design. Interaction designers, visual designers, and motion designers actually have pretty different jobs. Let me share a little bit more about each one of them, and some considerations when searching for these job openings online. Interaction designers focus on designing the experience of a product and how it functions. They figure out how to connect the user's needs and the business goals with what's actually feasible to build. I'm an interaction designer myself here at Google. Some keywords to look out for when searching for an interaction design job are user flows, wireframes, user interface mockups, and prototypes. If you excelled at creating your wireframes earlier in the program, you might want to pursue interaction design. Then there's visual designers. Visual designers focus on how a product or technology looks. They focus on things like iconography, typography, color, space, layout, and brand. If you've liked fine-tuning these design elements in your mock-ups and high-fidelity prototypes, this might be a good path for you. And last but not least, motion designers. Motion designers think about what it feels like for a user to move through a product and how to create smooth transitions between pages on an app or website. In other words, they use movement to convey an idea. They create interactions through transitions and animations. So if you liked playing with triggers and motion while creating your prototypes, that's the kind of work a motion designer might focus on. Depending on where you work in your career trajectory, you might have a depth of knowledge in one of these specific areas. Or you might have generalized knowledge and skills in each area. When you're trying to find work in UX design, it's important to consider whether you want to pursue a generalist or a specialist role like one of these. My advice to you is to keep an open mind, especially for your first job and early on in your career. It's hard to know exactly what type of specialty you might want to pursue before you get some on-the-job experience. So cast a wide net. All right, outside of these UX design jobs, there are a few other types of jobs that you might find during your search that I want you to be aware of. For example, you might find or search for jobs labeled UI designer. UI, or user interface designers, have similar responsibilities to visual designers. They're more concerned with the look and function of a digital product's interface and less focused on wireframing or information architecture. Some companies don't differentiate between UI and UX designers. So feel free to check out job postings for UI designers, read the job description carefully, and decide if you'd be a good fit for the role. In addition, you might want to explore product design. Product designers tend to work with both visual and interaction design and are responsible for figuring out how the whole product comes together. Product designers work together with the branding team, often defining the product's brand and marketing along the way. One more thing. You'll probably find job postings that simply list the position as a UX designer. That might mean you'd be responsible for any number of design tasks, from planning a button's location, to designing its shape and style, to making it appear as if it's being pressed. Be open to generalized roles like this in your job search, as they're a great way to learn a bunch of different skills. Later, when you've gained more real-world experience, you can reevaluate whether you want to transition into a more specialized role. All right, you're ready to check out some UX design job postings with these titles. Take a moment to reflect on the type of work you might want to do and if you'll search for a general or specialized title. Then, start exploring what's available in your area. Have fun! Welcome back. Now that you've started to think about the type of UX design jobs you might be interested in, let's talk about some common career paths: internships, apprenticeships, freelancing, and entry-level jobs. Internships are a great way to start your career. An internship is usually a short-term role with limited responsibility. You often work closely with a supervisor to learn more about the industry that you're interning in. It's a fantastic way to get real work experience. Plus, an internship might lead to a full-time job in the future. Another way to start your career is with an apprenticeship. Apprenticeships provide paid on-the-job training to help you develop real skills. Apprenticeships are similar to internships because you work closely with an experienced professional, but apprenticeships have a longer duration, usually 1 or 2 years. You could also explore freelancing. Freelancers work for themselves and market their services to businesses to find customers. Working as a freelancer can help you gain experience on real UX design projects. A good way to get started as a freelancer is to offer your services to a small business or nonprofit. In exchange for your work, you'll receive a good recommendation and a project to include in your portfolio. You'll learn more about freelancing in the next course. And finally, the most common way to start your career in UX design is an entry-level job. Entry-level jobs are roles that do not require prior experience in the field. The skills and portfolio pieces that you've developed in this program will help you get started as an entry-level UX designer. Plenty of companies might be interested in hiring someone who's completed this program and produced a portfolio of outstanding work. During your job search process, you should also consider the type of company you might want to work for. Let's quickly review some common types of companies where UX designers work so you can keep these in mind while reviewing job openings. First, there are startups. A startup is a new business that wants to develop a unique product or service and bring it to market. Startups generally have tight budgets and few employees, so each person has to perform a variety of jobs and move quickly. If you're a UX designer at a startup or another small business, you'll likely be a generalist. Designers at companies with fewer employees get involved in many parts of the business. Working at a startup or small business can be stressful, but also very rewarding. You learn quickly and usually have a lot of responsibilities, so it can be a great way to launch your career. Another common place UX designers work is at advertising agencies. Advertising agencies are teams of creatives hired by clients to build marketing campaigns. Working at an ad agency is a lot like freelancing in that you get to work with a bunch of different brands. But you'll be employed by the agency instead of being self-employed, and you'll be a part of a team. Design agencies and design studios are another good option to consider. A design agency provides a one-stop shop for the look of brands, products, and services. They're usually more specialized than ad agencies because they focus on design and branding. Since design agencies work with multiple clients, you might not work on a project from beginning to end. UX designers at design agencies regularly move between teams and work on different stages of a product's development. You'll probably be a generalist and the only designer on a project. You'll be exposed to a lot of different industries and get to solve unique problems. One more option. You could work as a UX designer at a corporation like Google, Apple, Nike, or Amazon. Corporations and other big companies have thousands of employees working on lots of different projects. UX designers are typically specialized in their work and focus on one project from beginning to end. Working at a big company is a great way to learn about specialization within UX design. Plus, you get to learn from other experts. When you're looking for jobs, it's important that you have an idea of what you'd like to do. Maybe you're flexible and willing to pursue any type of job in UX. Or maybe you have your heart set on becoming a motion designer at a big corporation. Whatever your unique situation and interest, these are important factors to consider in your job search. So, there you have it. You now have a strong baseline of knowledge for your job hunt. You'll also want to narrow your job search with other details, like your preferred location or level of experience required, but we'll get to that later. For now, start exploring online and take notes of jobs that pique your interest. Now that you've determined the types of jobs and companies you're interested in pursuing, it's time to start your job hunt. There will probably be lots of online searching, networking with professionals in the industry, and asking for referrals from friends. So without further ado, let's get started. The first resource you might use to find a job is Google for Jobs, which is an enhanced feature of Google Search. You can type your job search terms directly in your browser's search bar, and Google will aggregate thousands of job boards and company websites to find the jobs that match your terms. From there, you can add filters to narrow down your search for your specific criteria, such as the type of position you're looking for, required work experience, and the location of the job. Another place to find job postings is on the websites of specific companies you might want to work for. Some larger companies even have their own websites dedicated solely to recruitment. Next, check out job postings on all-purpose job boards like Indeed, Glassdoor, and ZipRecruiter. These job boards have lots of job search functionality and filters. You can also upload your resume to the site to get matches tailored to your interests. In addition, you might want to explore industry-specific job boards. If you completed the first course in the program, you might remember learning about professional networking sites like LinkedIn, Dribbble, and Behance. LinkedIn caters to professionals in all industries and is a favorite spot for recruiters of all kinds, while Dribbble and Behance are more tailored to the UX community. These sites have their own job boards, where companies can post openings for UX professionals. You can also review the profiles of companies that post jobs. It's important to maintain your online profiles when you're using sites like LinkedIn, Dribbble, and Behance. Your work experience and portfolio will automatically be tied to whatever position you apply for, and hiring managers will expect to be able to review examples of your work. So be sure your online profiles paint the picture of who you are as a designer. And if you decide to pursue freelance work, there are freelance job boards too, which can be a great entry point for new designers. It's worth checking out all these websites during your search. Keep in mind, the job search doesn't happen entirely through job boards. For example, you could also try to find a job through professional networking at industry events. Attending networking events in person or virtually is a great way to meet new people, make connections, and learn about job openings. Industry events can be relatively small, like the local chapter of a larger organization or an event at your community's library. Or industry events can be really large, like an international conference. Either way, these events are an opportunity for you to meet UX professionals, learn about their jobs and companies, and demonstrate your interest in starting your career. To find events like these, check out online resources like Medium, Eventbrite, or Meetup for a comprehensive list and joining details. We'll share a few tips in the course reading too. You should also begin personal networking. Consider reaching out to your friends, family members, classmates, former coworkers, and managers about starting your new career in UX design. You'd be surprised how many times you can successfully make a connection with someone in the industry just by talking about work with people you already know. They might be able to connect you directly with recruiters in the field or suggest a group where these professionals meet, both online and offline. The idea is to make your interests known because you never know who others in your network might know. All right, now you have a solid understanding of where to search for jobs. Up next, let's explore how to analyze job descriptions and make updates to your resume. Meet you there. Hello again. You've been thinking about the types of UX design jobs you might want to apply for, and you just learned about where to search for jobs. Now, in this video, you'll learn how to explore job descriptions and update your resume based on a job description. I'll share a few pro tips along the way, so let's get started. As a reminder, job descriptions explain what you do in the role you're applying for. When you review job descriptions, you'll want to pay attention to key terms. Key terms are important words that tell you the specifics about the job. To search for a key term within a job description, use Control F or Command F. This is known as the find command. If you're in a web browser and want to search all the text on a page, pressing Control F will bring up a search bar. Type in that search bar and you'll be able to locate the text you've typed within the page. A lot of what you've learned through this course will help you notice key terms that other beginner designers can't. For example, words like usability study, wireframe, prototype, visual design, and ideate can hint at what the role entails. Many people who are new to the field of UX design probably can't explain the difference between wireframes and prototypes, but you can. So this is something to highlight in your resume. That's my first pro tip. Use key terms from job descriptions in your resume. If a company expects you to build prototypes, you'll want to emphasize that you understand what this means and showcase your previous experience with prototypes. Keep in mind, key terms might also include soft skills like collaboration, presenting findings, or working remotely. These soft skills refer to how you get work done, rather than what you're working on. If there are certain ways you really like to work, feel free to search for those key terms and include them in your resume too. In addition to key terms, you'll also want to take note of the job requirements listed. Job requirements describe the expectations of the person who lands that job. It's often helpful to specifically mention some of these job requirements in your resume to show that you're a good candidate for the role. So it's similar to the first pro tip, but my second tip is to mention some of the job requirements in your resume. All right, after you've dug into a job description in detail, you should analyze the key terms and requirements you've noted. How do the expectations for the role align with your experience and interests? Remember, you do not need to meet every single job requirement listed, but you should be comfortable and confident with the majority of them. Finding a job is a two-way street. As much as you want a company to hire you, you also want to make sure that you will enjoy and succeed in the role. So while you're analyzing the job description, determine if you're a good fit for the job. Now that you have carefully reviewed the details of the job, are you still interested in applying? Sometimes a job that seems perfect at first glance is less appealing after careful consideration. That's okay. Not every internship or job will be a good fit for you. But if a job interests you and you have some of the required skills, don't let the idea of a perfect fit stand in the way. Adapt your resume to that specific position and show the recruiter or hiring manager why you are a good fit for the role. Finally, let me share one more tip. Decide if the job will help you meet your goals. For example, if you're looking for a paid job, then an unpaid internship might not be right for you. It's okay to go outside of your comfort zone, especially for your first position. But you don't want to move forward with a role that won't help you meet your short-term or long-term goals, both personally and professionally. With all of this in mind, you are ready to review some job descriptions. The more you explore, the more you'll find. So be persistent and keep searching. At this point, you're ready to take a major step in the job application process, creating a resume. If you've never written a resume before, that's okay. Over the next few videos, we'll cover the entire process, from choosing a resume template to populating the resume with keywords from UX design job descriptions. We'll also discuss how resumes are structured, and we'll dig into what makes a UX designer's resume different than the standard resumes, from the layout to the typography. You'll get to apply the visual design principles you've learned in this program to your resume. To start, let's take a peek at a polished UX designer's resume as an example. Here, Emily lists her contact information at the top of the page. Next, she describes her education, including the completion of this certificate program. Then, she lists her work experience, like being a self-employed photographer and a sales associate. Finally, Emily lists her skills, including some of the skills she gained through this program, like working in Figma and Adobe XD. Your resume can follow a similar structure to this example, including your contact information, education, work experience, and skills. Sometimes other information, like awards or interests, are included, but those aren't required. The amount of information to include and the length of the resume can vary depending on the experience of the person applying. But most people who are looking for internships or entry-level jobs should keep their resume to only one page. This is because hiring managers have to read a lot of resumes, so they usually need to scan them quickly. They might not have time to read every detail of a multiple-page document. So your resume needs to highlight major accomplishments, just like your portfolio. One page with just a few items in each section is all you need to show your experience. Plus, when it comes to UX design jobs, your portfolio is the key to getting an interview. Though your resume might get you through to the recruiter, your portfolio is what a hiring manager or potential boss will focus on. So make sure the link to your portfolio is prominent within your resume and easy to type. Likewise, include links to your professional networking pages as well, like LinkedIn, Dribbble, and Behance. Recruiters will be interested to see your role in the UX design community. Finally, keep in mind that you'll probably have multiple versions of your resume, tailored to specific jobs you're applying to. Before you start building a resume, it helps to brainstorm your ideal job beforehand. And as you review job descriptions, you'll want to include key terms and requirements in your tailored resume, like I described earlier. Okay, are you ready to start drafting your resume? Let's go.
My name is Dane, and I'm a visual designer at Google. For an entry-level resume, it can be really interesting. You don't have a ton of UX experience once you're entering this UX job. The cool thing to remember is that for UX design, they want to see what separates you from others, what makes you different and what makes you unique. There's always a way to take whatever experience you have and focus on larger scale strengths. So it's important to remember that everything you do is still important. Any design background that you have, whether it be working on small projects for teachers or working on a commission or any freelance work while you're in high school, it's really okay to add that to your resume. One of my first resumes I had that I worked on all of the theater programs from high school. It wasn't a job, but it was design experience that I had and really wanted to feature. Even if it's not focused on specifically UX design, find ways to pinpoint the leadership opportunities that you've had. Did you have to focus on critical thinking in your job? Did you have to figure out how to work under pressure or work very well with a team? Or were you managing or leading a group of people within the company? All of that matters, as well as the tenure. How long were you staying there? For one of my early level resumes, I had a retail job on there that really doesn't apply to UX design at all. But what I loved most about it was the tenure. So I worked there for about 6 years. I did have a ton of I did have a ton of experience that was built there. So instead of saying that I just worked in retail, I focused on more leadership opportunities. I want employers to know who I am as a person through this one pager. So when it comes to making your resume stand out, you want to really focus on the design of it. So of course, there are a ton of resume templates out there that you can use to fill in your content. And I highly recommend starting with one of those, but find a way to tweak it and make it feel like you. You want to develop your brand in a way that when an employer sees it, they say, whoa, this is, this is different from all of the other pages that we've got. When it comes to prepping your portfolio, you want to make sure your resume is up to date, it matches your portfolio. So what I do is I check a bunch of different design inspiration websites to see what the latest trends are, what the latest styles are, and what is the latest software that people are using and experimenting with. And you might start to see now that things are becoming more 3D with more depth, and there's different software to accommodate for that kind of design styling. So if you're able to hop onto that trend and be able to add that software to your resume, that'll automatically separate yours from others. UX design is such a valuable role within every single company, and whichever company you end up at, you're going to have a huge impact as a UX designer.